Hey guys, I actually meant to do something like this, and then remove, but yeah, I see everyone's in the house and I'm a little bit late. I'm going to bring in Stephanie and Bria right now. Just a little bit worried because we in totally three different parts of the world. Stephanie's in Connecticut, USA. Bria is in France. I'm in South Africa. It's quite it might be a bit difficult for StreamYard to cope. So there's a bit of a delay. Well, hopefully we can be patient and deal with it. So let's see if we can bring them in. Stephanie coming in, add to stream, and Bria, add to stream. There we go. Wow. Good to see you guys.
Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Stephanie, can you hear Bria?
I was muted. Can you hear me now?
You were muted. I can. Bria, can you hear Stephanie?
I can now, yes, I can hear Stephanie. Hi, everybody.
Okay, how are you guys doing? Well, your heads are bigger than mine. I don't know if I must lean forward like...
Oh.
I'll back up.
Yeah, maybe we try and keep it kind of similar. You see, I'm from California.
Yeah. Hey.
No, this was actually given to me from someone from California, so it's quite interesting. So it's good to have you here. Yeah. Again, I don't know why the background isn't what I put up, but at least the logo is there now. So today we're going to talk about, just in general, about Don. Where was Don? Do you guys know that? Remember, Plunder put up a kind of almost like a joke. She put up a thing saying, "Okay, Don, I'm sure Chris will give you a chance to clear up your last interview." Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, that's
and
now
he
happened.
went on another interview today. You're right.
Yeah. So he's now gone into another channel to clear up the previous interview, and they're probably going to need to clear up what he said in this last interview now again.
Yeah. Yeah. You called it. You just have to.
That's also quite interesting.
So,
Stephanie, have you seen that last interview?
Yes, I did, and I took notes.
Okay. Because I think we should probably touch on that. There's some interesting things to talk about. Bria, have you seen it?
So I haven't seen it. I tried to see it, but I've been traveling, so I haven't had a chance to see that last interview yet. But I did see that you posted it, and I haven't had a chance to see that yet.
No, not a problem. Bria, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself? And also, you say you've been traveling. Where were you? Also,
right. So
you're originally from Canada, right?
I am a very proud Canadian. I always try to say that. So I have been living in France for the last 10 years or so now. But yeah, I come from Canada, and I'm from Vancouver Island, and Vancouver too, and so from the west coast of Canada. I traveled quite a bit. Anyways, I actually traveled Thailand quite a bit, and before coming to France, and some of my stories are from there. I did. I lived there for just over 2 years. So I am a boxer. And I particularly do, I'm a boxer. So, and I specifically do Muay Thai, which is like a Thai type of kickboxing. And I traveled to Thailand. I did live there and compete there for over 2 years, and until I ended up moving to France, and where I live now. And I run a gym. We do Thai boxing. I run a gym with my husband and my family now. We do that. Run our own gym and teach lessons there, and and I'm in Bordeaux in the south of France, and I've been I just, like Stephanie, she just celebrated her 15-year anniversary. I'm celebrating mine, which is tomorrow. And we brought the kids.
Congratulations.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, tomorrow to have a little vacation. We came to the French Riviera. It's a dream that we always wanted to do. We've always wanted to come here, and this year we decided to stay in France, and this is probably one of the maybe most amazing places in France. So we made it happen. We're really excited that we were able to do that. And I just got here. So I wanted to actually, you know, I wished I could have had this amazing background, but I just got here. The best I could do is just get a quiet room to have a chat.
That's a good start.
But, yeah, I just got here, the Côte d'Azur, the Blue Coast in the south of France. It's amazing so far. It's been here just today. Yeah. So it's really nice of you to invite me onto the channel to talk about some of my experiences, specifically when I did live in Thailand, training at the Thai boxing camp, and specifically running a very, very long route every day and interacting with street dogs and dog packs, essentially, that are in the area. I think it helped me understand dogs a lot more when I had that experience.
Yeah, we're going to talk about dog packs. We're going to talk about opioids to some extent. Stephanie's got quite a lot of experience in that area. Also, I just want to say a big welcome to Sharon Tuck, who is moderating for the first time. I'm not actually sure if there's anyone else helping her, but I have slowed chat down. Yeah, I've slowed chat down quite a lot, so hopefully that'll help. But so far, people seem to be quite well behaved. Bria, how did you find out about true crime rocket science?
So how I found out about true crime rocket science was I've always been a true crime, ever since I was very, very young. I was always very interested in true crime, always. Also, specifically the JonBenet Ramsey case. I grew up, you know, just absolutely being terrified. You know, our mothers were like, oh, you know, hold your babies close. And we were so scared, you know, somebody was coming to get everyone. We were little kids that, you know, a little close to that age. I was 12 when that happened, nonetheless. But I just grew up. I always wondered, I thought that was just very strange. And then always following true crime, the Chris Watts case. And, you know, everyone's going on this one side, and I was just like, oh, so was not my taste. And from the first video that you made, I just immediately just was like, this is it. This is the most authentic voice in true crime, hands down. And I knew immediately, and I just thought that, you know,
the other channel not saying too much there. We want to be nice, not nasty, even in our non-compliments, I guess. Whoa, where did you go?
I don't know.
That's weird.
Maybe it's a connection problem.
Maybe she got a call.
That could be. I'm sure she'll pop right back on.
I'm not sure if I've got to add her again or just wait. Let me just have a look here. It's not right. See if I can bring her back. Add to stream. I don't know if she unadded herself.
There she is.
Hi, sorry. I just lost you guys, and I just added myself back in, and I guess you had to add me back in. I was kind of on standby immediately thereafter. Sorry about that.
Okay. Now, well, there's a bit of a learning curve. Okay, so we're going to have to be careful giving each of us equal opportunity to chat, but at the same time, letting our audience sort of, so that we can move forward with what we're saying. So we want to tell our story, but we also need to kind of keep the ball rolling, if you know what I'm saying, right? Just bear in mind, we've got an audience who wants to know about Summer Wells. So we don't want to go off that script for too long. So if any of us do, including me, just sort of say, hey, right? Okay, so at the moment we've got 1,000 people in chat or whatever. So I think let's sort of get going. I think we're going to deal with our respective stories a little bit later. So Bria, we'll talk about the dogs and the dog packs a little bit later. Stephanie will talk about your pretty scary experience when you were a kid in the pharmacy. But I want to just start off by touching on a couple of things. Let me just. Well, first of all, did you guys know, Bria, do you know that Chris McDonough was actually a consultant to Lou Smith on.
Yes, yes, I did.
Yeah, quite interesting.
Right. Yeah, he spoke about that in one of his more recent interviews, more in depth, when he went on the the other channel. It's a Crime, I think.
Yeah, It's a Crime.
With the other, right, and he talked about that more. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to try and run through this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a couple of things, and then you guys can kind of either add some of your own observations or just respond to what I'm saying, and then we'll just go through it. And then we're going to deal with some of our own thoughts and ideas in separate areas. So this is basically just dealing with Don's latest interview. I don't know, I've kind of lost count now how many times he's given them. Bear in mind how many times he was in the media. So just as a intro to that, I actually just did some research on what are drywalling tools. I was just sort of wondering what are the actual tools you use in drywalling, and I can't say I saw anything that really led me in any particular direction. It's sort of things on poles and buckets of paint, and it's not really something that I think we really need to concentrate too much at this point, except the fact that drywalling is all about covering over rough surfaces and putting a veneer, a smooth, nice veneer over something that doesn't look so good. That is what he does for a living. As far as I know, he's been doing it for 13 years. As if I'm understanding him correctly, he's worked for the same company 13 years. That would suggest to me that he's pretty good pals with his co-workers and vice versa, that they know him, he knows them, and I think that's just quite an interesting thing to consider, that he's been in the same job for a really long time. What does that mean, right? He also mentioned two individuals. I'm not going to talk about them right now. I will get back to them. But he mentioned two specific individuals in that thing. He was actually using the church Wi-Fi, I think, when he made this discussion. And so what I want you guys to respond to, maybe Stephanie first, did you get the, I don't know if you saw it, but what do you think about Don saying that actually there was a red truck there that morning, and the police were actually there that morning on June 15th, and that he was actually helping them? So it wasn't like he just saw the truck and drove off. He actually kind of was involved in some way. I don't know whether he was getting the truck, maybe it was stuck, but he was literally involved with the truck. And there was apparently a woman in the back who was sleeping, who said hadn't combed her hair in 2 months or something. So it seemed like almost someone was camping there, like in a truck, in a red truck that morning, and the police were there on June the 15th. The thing that I found kind of interesting was that Don doesn't, it's like, I didn't know who they were. Like, and you've also got to ask yourself, is that likely? Is it likely that someone camping on his driveway and the police finding him there with them when it's this drug corridor, is it likely, do you think, that he didn't know them? And also, do you think that's the red truck?
I think it's a strong possibility it's the red truck. I learned that Don is the one who gave that tip to TBI because he had encountered or helped that truck in the morning. I guess someone else had called, or a neighbor had called the police about it, and then he had gone and helped. I don't think it's likely that they were unknown to him. I think he probably knew who they were. I don't think it was uncommon for different people to be there doing whatever they do. John even said we often have, and my neighbors have seen people just in my driveway doing drugs.
And apparently doesn't know who they are. They're sort of in the area. It's quite a remote area, but no, I don't know who they are.
Yeah,
they're not coming to him for drugs, obviously, right?
Yeah, if I had seen or heard from my neighbors that there were strange vehicles and people on my property, that wouldn't be something that wouldn't go undealt with until something happened. So seems like that
And
was
also, I
a
think
normal
if
part of life.
someone was stuck, would you, and you were on your way to work, would you, and it was quite a long way to go to work, would you sort of help them if you didn't know them, kind of thing? Now, I don't know if it's a cultural thing in Tennessee that you automatically would, but I'm just trying to address this issue of did he not know them? I just want to, I know, Bria, what you're going to talk about a little bit later on, but maybe we should touch on it at this point, that possibly what was being grown, was something being grown in those sheds.
Well, I think it's a really good possibility. And that, while you're talking about drywalling, just by chance, my mother's partner owns a drywalling company for the last 30 years. He does drywall. Oh, wow. Yeah. And we've all worked for him, including myself. I worked for him at a point in time. And I actually did the finishing work, the taping. It's the easier of the jobs. I worked here downtown in Vancouver. He works, like I said, he's worked over 30 years at the time. See, drywallers are usually private contractors, which means they usually work per job, by job. They also then usually work piecework, which is like room by room, right? So it's like when you finish a room, each room is kind of worth however much. You're private contracting usually. So sometimes once you get the hang of it a little bit, after a few years, you can maybe become, when you get to know guys, you can maybe make your own team, and you can hire guys to work with you because because you're a private contractor, you have a contract, and you need to get this, a building done. It could be any building, and even if it's just a house.
Is there usually quite a few people? Sorry to interrupt. Are there usually quite a few people involved in drywalling? Like, is it like a team of 10 people? Is it a lot of people?
So it depends on the job. I mean, if for example, if Don was just working on like houses and say the piece was just one house, I mean, if you get a contract that you're building a high rise or an apartment building or a hospital, it might be a different story. And so it's all, again, about business connections. Once you are good at your job, say, you can get, bigger jobs and bigger connections. I was working when my mother's partner was, he had contracts to put high rises up downtown in Vancouver. We all worked for him at a certain point, that's for sure. It's really hard work. Anyways, drywallers, they put up the drywall, and then there's another job, the finishing, which is the taping. And the mud that they talk about is actually it's like a white mud. The mud, it's white. You finish the corners and in the cracks and corners with it. Yeah, it's not like a mud with dirt. Like, if anyone was thinking of that type of mud, the mud that they use. I guess, it's like gooey and it's white.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's white. So yeah, we worked drywall, and so just that you were talking about that, it depends. So yeah, you do get to know the people involved. If you work well, so because it's piecework, you want to get the job done as fast as possible, right?
So
So if you work good with guys,
sorry to interrupt, can I ask you, is there a tool that comes to mind out of the drywalling toolbox that you could say one could use outside of drywalling to, for example, excavate or dig something up? Would that apply? Is a shovel part of drywalling?
Not necessarily, but anytime you're on a work site like that, that stuff is everywhere. I mean, shovel, it's everywhere. It may not be your thing that you're using, maybe a shovel. They use a lot of drills. They drill, put pieces up, drill them in, right? Cut things and whatnot. But shovels are everywhere on any work site. There's a lot of tools involved, even in drywalling. But
so something else that came up in this most recent interview, where he basically said, I didn't know this, I certainly learned something. He basically said he got a call from Candace. He described her as being anxious and afraid and also terrified. So, like it was like this emergency. And then he sort of said, call 911. And the next thing he did was he threw all his drywalling tools into the new vehicle, the Subaru. I'm not quite sure how other people pronounce it, and it just made me, and even said his boss kind of raised his eyebrows at that, like, wow, you're going to put your tools in your brand new vehicle. And like, what I'm just trying to think is, in an emergency, like if let's put it onto you, if your husband called you or somebody called you and you were drywalling, do you think you would put all your tools into your vehicle and then drive back, or would you just leave them there with your co-workers?
Drywallers, because there's so much tools involved, for sure, they always leave their tools on the job site. They usually leave them on the job site because, just packing them, because it's an early job, you're there first thing in the morning. When you're working on a job, they do often leave their tools in the wherever they're working. They take them home on the weekend. They'll take them home on the weekend, but during work week, they leave them there. Usually, that's from what I've experienced.
That's quite interesting. Mrs. Hippie Lynn says it's not a lot of tools. From what I've seen,
it's not. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Well, there's a lot of tools on job sites. For drywalling, you need a good drill. You need to be able to cut and drill, but you would have access to other tools usually if you're working on a job site.
Okay.
And usually the drywallers they often leave their tools in their suites or wherever they're working. They don't always bring them home.
Bring Stephanie back.
Sorry, it's like musical cameras.
Yeah. So did you mean to go off, Stephanie, or?
No.
Oh, because I didn't know. I was like, are you being polite to give us, So anyway, I was a little bit concerned there. So do you want to ask Bria anything about drywalling and that old tool thing?
I missed part of it, so I have to go back and watch. I was like booted.
Okay, no. Well, I don't know how you came out of it. I don't know whether it's a StreamYard thing when you have more than two people, it starts to jump around. But so Bria, just like a simple question, if you were in that situation, you got a call, do you think you would, even if it's not a lot of tools, do you think you would have just because your tools are kind of wet and dirty and muddy? If you wanted to put them in a vehicle, no matter what vehicle, you'd probably be kind of concerned, well, they're dirty and they so I'll just...
Well, you have to connect them to electricity and stuff, so you'd have to unplug all your tools, so yeah, that's the thing. It's like, and then you would probably just leave them there, especially in an emergency, I think. When the guys go to lunch and stuff, they leave their tools there, And I think in an emergency, you just leave them there, because also too, you would expect that there would be other guys on your job site. Like, you're going to come back and they, you know, they're not going to touch your tools, right? So like, your tools are there. It's not that big of a deal. It's not like you're going home for the weekend.
So Tina says, my husband would never leave my tools, and someone else says, dudes usually never lose their tools, whatever. What I'm trying to touch on, and you know, we'll know more as this goes on, but is this Don trying to play for time? Is he trying to make time go by where he's innocently somewhere else? So, for example, if he says he got this call and then he spent a certain amount of time packing his tools, well, he was not doing anything wrong when that happened, if that makes sense. In other words, you know, Chris Watts said the same thing. He said the morning of the incident, he said, yeah, I was packing tools into my truck. In other words, it's what he was doing that is supposed to be innocent. And then the question is, was he really packing tools, or was something else going on? Because the other side of it is, if he was at work and if he left the work site immediately, then why did it take him so long, or why did it take him so short? You know, you've got to, so that's really what you want to look at. He has said that he did a 45-minute journey in 30 minutes, and then he also got there before the police, but then he's out by an hour. So he had to be reminded, he actually said this in his last interview, he had to be reminded by the TBI that they were called at 6:30. And he thought it was 5:30. So he actually got the timeline wrong to them, and he had to be reminded, and he admitted that on this last show. So you kind of have this weird thing of he told Candace to phone 911 immediately, but then he doesn't come back immediately. He says he was in a panic and he knew immediately what had happened, yet he first packs his tools. And that is something that is in conflict with that idea of urgency and conviction. If you know it's an emergency, you know she's abducted, you know something serious has happened, and you're going to drive at breakneck speed to get there, why would you start off by packing your tools? There may be an innocent explanation, we may be nitpicking, but it is something to address, right? So I just want to see what else I've written here. So did he know them? And so he went from there to saying meth is a serious problem, and it always has been. I found that quite interesting, how he was almost trying to make, in the way he framed it right in the beginning, he sort of said, meth is a serious problem now. Oh, yeah, it always has been. It seems like he wasn't quite sure what he was trying to say. And I think it's interesting that he sort of puts up his hand and says, meth is a problem. Because I just wonder, is it something else? Is it not meth? And that brings us to Bria, Stephanie. Tell us a bit about, you work in a pharmacy. Not, I mean, I know you're going to go into more detail about that experience when you were a kid. We'll get to it in a second, but what is your experience of, I know something you said to me directly, you said people are never late to pick up their prescriptions if it's for opiates or opioids.
No, they're never late. They're always trying to get them early, in fact. And when we talk more in depth about it, my sister wrote a really good response from the pharmacist perspective that I can share with you, unless you want me to do that now.
Yeah, you can do it now.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot. Have you got the notes in front of you? I'll just read. I'll read one. Yeah.
You want me to read it, or you want to read it? I'll read it.
One or two. Are you ready to read it?
Okay. Okay, I'll read it.
You have No. I was going to read a couple of comments, but I thought you weren't ready. But I see you are ready.
Okay, so I call this a pharmacist perspective. I had asked my sister to share her input as a pharmacist in the midst of an opioid epidemic. And this is her experience working in an independent pharmacy in a small town in Connecticut. Drug use and abuse is prevalent even in this area. There is a methadone clinic for drug detox and rehabilitation located here as well. Let's see.
Lady of Angels says his tools are his livelihood. Sorry to interrupt. She says his tools are his livelihood. It makes sense he would take them. So anyway, it's just something to think about. Someone says maybe if you didn't have money to buy supplies, you wouldn't care about tools or something. Someone also said, love you, Stephanie. Anyway, carry on. By the way, Kia, thank you. Christine, thank you for your super chat there.
She wrote, people on Medicaid and Medicare get opiates for free all the time. Most have chronic pain situations that they've been treated for a long time. The DEA, which is the Drug Enforcement Administration, is cutting down on the amount that primary care is allowed to prescribe, so most are now through pain management. In theory, these patients could receive their controlled substances for free and in turn sell them on the street. Most issues where patients show up to clinics and are able to get illegal prescriptions for pain meds that she's heard of have been in Florida. She's seen documentaries but hasn't had a personal experience with that. When controlled substances could be phoned in the past, or when C2s, which are drugs with a high potential for abuse, were handwritten, there was a lot more concern over forgery, where people would change quantities on written prescriptions or phone in phony Vicodin prescriptions. The electronic system that we've had over the past, for the past 5 years or so, has now virtually made this a non-issue. There's a website.
Okay, so let me just jump in quickly. So I think that's an excellent point. Is so you can get these drugs for free, and then you can sell them on, and you know, so you think about it in a weird way. Just think about it from the perspective of you are struggling in your livelihood, you unemployed, or you are whatever, poor or something, and here's the system where you're actually getting drugs for free, and you're a drug addict, you're a drug user, and now you can sell these things which you've been given by the government. Isn't it a great deal? It's like almost like for whatever reason you're given extra alcohol for free, and you sell that on to other alcoholics. I mean, it's and so you just need. So this is maybe where you can maybe provide us with some insight. Is there a way that you could sort of illegitimately, but I won't say legally, but sort of technically play the system where you say, wow, I've really hurt my knee, or wow, I'm in a lot of pain, I think I need some more, and then you should be prescribed something based on what you're saying, but you actually are getting a lot more than you should be getting. You know, in other words, you can abuse the system by faking your ailments, right?
Yeah, I have seen it where there's certain patients and customers that come in time and time again, and they always have a back injury, or they smash their fingers at work, and they try to get away with going from one doctor to another, but now they're really cracking down on that. And as I was saying, there's a website that pharmacists can go on that'll show where you filled your prescription, exactly how many, and all the doctors that have prescribed for you. And you can just type in their name and the date range that you want to search for to kind of weed people out, because we're trying not to accept as many patients that are on narcotics. That is.
Okay, so how is this for sorry to interrupt, how's this for a horrible thought? Let's say you want to get your hands on opiates, right? And there's someone near you who's got a somewhat weak knee. And if you sort of suddenly feel, okay, you know what, I actually need them tomorrow. Well, couldn't you just kind of kick that person's knee or whatever? Well, now they are in pain, and now, well, go and get some painkillers, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? In other words,
yeah,
I have. Yeah. I don't know if you know about this in gardening. Do you guys know what an aphid is? Bria, do you know what an aphid is? It's like the little black specks you get on plants.
Mm-hmm. I do, yes.
And then the ants climb up on these plants and they tickle the aphids.
Yeah, they cluster.
Yeah, and so they kind of what's the word? Parasite off these little insects by doing that. Now, I just wonder, again, it might be very rude of me to say it, but I just wonder whether someone who's very mean and very nasty, a nasty piece of work, could do something like that. And I also think you've got to ask, why is grandma on the property? What's her, like, if she and Don don't get along, why is she allowed to be there? Like, what's the payoff for him? And you might say is a wonderful man, is a believer, is truly reformed. That's why she's there, or something else. But I think we want to know, what was that prescription? And, some people might say it was more likely morphine, or it was more likely this, or it was more likely that. So let me ask you, Stephanie, can you sort of say, well, wow, I've really hurt my knee, I want oxycodone. Can you point the prescription in that direction? So let's just say the end result is, I do want oxy. I've now do have a legitimately damaged knee. Can you sort of say, well, yeah, I'd like oxy, please, not that, not that?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the doctor that you see. If it's kind of like a sliding scale too. If it's a newly injured knee, they would typically, depending on what is shown to be the matter with your knee, they would start you off with something more mild, less habit forming. If it's something that's chronic and over a period of time, you're more likely to get something like an opioid.
Also, the more serious, if you take grandma's knee, for example, if it was serious enough, she'd need possibly oxycodone, right?
Yeah, if it was, it would depend on, I don't know what issue she has with it. I
do think it's going on long enough as well. Maybe going on long enough that they would maybe then need to manage that pain by something like that, right? Is that
pain management?
Pain management, right?
So did you guys notice?
And I think you can say that, this works for me. You could say to your doctor, well, I'm better with this.
Or I tried this.
I think you can influence. I tried this. I didn't, and so this one was better for me. I think you could influence your prescriptions.
So did you guys notice in Candace's story, Candace said that if I'm right, I might be getting my lines crossed, but I think Candace said that the boys kicked grandma's knee, like the boys are running over her knee, and like, I don't know, you both have got small children. Do you really think that is what happened, that the boys are running over grandma's knee to the extent that it was eventually so bad she had to go to the emergencies? In other words, are the boys being made a scapegoat for what somebody else did, or did that really happen? Because surely if the boys are running, like, I would just imagine, in a real situation like this, if the boy ran over her knee once, you would, as an older person, say, stop, go and play over there, end of story. You wouldn't be like, oh, okay, I better go to the hospital now. You know what I mean? In other words, do do you believe that story that the boys did that to Grandma's knee?
I personally don't believe that at all. I don't believe that whatsoever, because I believe that history repeats itself. I believe that the boys have been scapegoats already in many facets of this story already, and they kind of just throw them in there anytime it's convenient. I think that this is just another example of just exactly how they've done just that, just kind of putting it off on them once again.
Yeah. What do you think, Stephanie?
I was going to say, I think it could be possible. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating.
It's definitely possible. But, you know, if you take what Bria's just said, there's also the precedent of that drunken argument where Candace seemed to take the fall in terms of where she said, no, Don actually pushed me. And it just seems like, well, Grandma's the one with the injured knee. Where did Candace hurt her knee? I must say, I did go through Candace's Facebook and I found a wound on the knee. I don't know if that is that actual wound, but it was quite a deep cut. And it looked like Candace's leg and it looked like the knee. So, you know, you've got to be careful rushing to judgment. But at this point, we're just trying to put the pieces together, I think. So we've spoken now a little bit about...
The grandmother's knee, it has a prosthetic. Sorry to cut you off, but the grandmother's knee has a prosthetic, right? So you might know if it was the grandmother's knee or the same knee causing the problems, the chronic problems with the pain medicine, or Candace's knee, right? So maybe
I think
that's
it's a brace. When I think of a prosthetic, I think of Oscar Pistorius. I think of a...
Me too.
Like a knee brace to help
I think.
it heal.
Yeah. Thanks, Toggle.
I was thinking that it could be possible because the environment that the children are in, oftentimes you repeat behavior that's seen or done to you. We don't know how they were treated. And it's kind of like this underlying wondering what else could they have been involved in. And it's not their fault, but they've been exposed to so much that I just don't really feel comfortable saying either way.
No, it's fine. Susan Becker, so let's just maybe go to the comments for a while. Susan Becker says drug tests for that day were negative for opioids. I don't think that's a fact. I think Donna said that Candace tested positive for marijuana. I don't know whether that's it. I don't know if that's the full story. I think, I don't know if he said what he tested positive for, but I just wonder. I don't think you can say it's a fact that they tested negative for that. It could be. The other thing to bear in mind, and we learned this, or some of us learned it in the Chris Watts case, is, and I think Stephanie can maybe back me up on this, opioids have an extremely rapid half-life, so you can take them in and they'll be out of your system really, really quickly. I think that's another benefit to them, is that they're a little bit different to other substances that can stay in your body. Opiates can go in and dissipate really, really quickly. Is that right?
I don't know too much about how they work. I think I know that there are different kinds, like extended release or like...
Yeah, okay, so with Oxy, one of the warnings that they give you, it's like a kind of express warning, including even on the labeling, is they say, do not grind this down. Do not turn it into a powder, because if you do that, it can be absorbed so quickly that it can actually kill you, right? So right. What that's actually telling you is it's extremely fast in absorption. So don't grind it down, because you'll make it even faster. And I think it stands to reason that if it is absorbed that quickly, it can also... But I mean, don't take my word for it. You can Google it. That is something I did do. a lot of people complained and said, you know what, if when I spoke about oxy really early on, they said, you know what, I don't know what you're talking about because it didn't come up in the autopsy. It's not a factor, and it turned out it was a factor. But it may not come up in toxicology. I don't know whether those autopsy reports are complete. That's another story. Chris Watts actually said in his letter, he said, the reason oxy came up in the medical examiner's report is because I put it there. So I don't know whether it released very quickly or whether the reports are incomplete, but it certainly was a factor. But that is something I definitely research, is that it's got a very unusual absorption rate and a very quick, it has a half-life that is very rapid, and so it gets flushed out of the system. I'm not a drug addict, so I can't tell you that makes it a better drug than another in terms of being traced. But maybe a drug addict could tell you that, or a former drug addict. So I don't know if anyone in chat has got experience with that. Someone here says urine 2 to 4 days, 2 to 7 days, saliva 5 hours, blood 6 hours, hair up to 90 days for heroin. Hair, certainly I know about that for those sort of things. I don't know whether oxy would go into the hair. I just don't know. It's quite a good question.
But it's different if you, like you said, if you're crushing something, whether you're just swallowing it whole, whether you're snorting something, injecting something, it depends on how you take it too, how quickly it's gonna.
Yeah. So let's just quickly go into Bria. Bria, let's talk a little bit about what may have been grown in those sheds. So I think it's quite interesting that there are all of these sheds, and let's talk about that.
Well, the thing with the sheds for me, I thought that there's some discrepancy on how many sheds are actually on the 11 acres of property. I was at first, I thought that there was 2 sheds, a red one and a silver one, on kind of nearer the house. And then this other shed kind of pops up sort of down by the dog path, sort of down more on the
near
road
the creek
side more, near the creek. At one point, I think it was Don said that there was several sheds throughout his property. Several. So how many sheds are there? That's what I don't know if we even know that. He also mentioned that he said that people had been, Candace too had said that people had stayed, there was a guy at one point that was staying in a shed on the property. They had this story. The sheds have popped up a lot in this story. It does leave one to wonder what is in any of the sheds. So which shed, this shed or that shed. I do think it's somewhat possible that, he could have been growing something in there. I mean, to grow something, I do agree that you would need some growing equipment. But I think usually when people are growing in sheds like that and on property like that, he might have affiliations with some other, growing kind of guys who might come in a few times a week and help with the grow op that they have going on there, the grow operation. They might drag out they could drag out the pots to get some sun during the day and drag them in and lock them up at night. I don't know what they would have done.
Sorry, we know that Candace tested positive for marijuana. So the question is, did she get it from the property or somewhere else? If she did get it somewhere else, where? The other thing I think is, if they were growing marijuana, wouldn't Macbeth perhaps really like Candace? If they were growing marijuana, wouldn't Macbeth be like, wow, Candace, I like you? Maybe perhaps that's why they hung out on the property for quite a while. Maybe that's why they have parties there. I don't know. Someone else suggested it could be a meth shed, that it might actually be for the production of meth there, right?
Right.
To be honest, I don't know whether I think it's a mistake to say, okay, it's what it is, it's marijuana. You know what it is? I think it's meth. I think it's all of them. I think it's meth, marijuana, and opiates, and whatever they could make and whatever. I think it's drugs. It's plural. It's not one or the other. It's all of them, right? It's a drugs corridor. And I think it's quite interesting that Don sort of acknowledges that, and it's like, well, we just innocently hear the drug mules and everyone are running by our property. We don't know where, but we happen to be here, and even our dogs run off. But we, I find that quite strange. I mean, is the drug corridor like a red carpet that goes right up to the Wells home or not? If not, where does it go? And we've also got the other neighbors saying, well, it's Ben Hill hell. It sounds like the right term for a party house and other things going on there. So, yeah, I just think it's quite interesting that this drug narrative is here, but it doesn't really seem to go anywhere. It's like, okay, so there's drugs everywhere. And the first thing that Don says when the police come across him is, I'm going to go and investigate drug dealers. Oh, you're not going to ask any of us to do that. It's actually our job. But you know where they are. You know where the drug dealers are. How do you know? How do you know that?
We learned last night in the interview that Don, that I had seen Don on, that he even admits that there's a lot of meth and pill popping going on on his property. He admits that. So we know that there's a combination of things that are going on.
Yeah, and I think you've also got to say, please explain why you bought a new vehicle. You've just bought a new vehicle, and otherwise you are clearly struggling. So, where did the money come from for that? I can tell you now, I've been shopping for a vehicle myself, and you're quite aware of all the things that go into that. I just want to acknowledge some of the super chats quickly. Someone was saying, let's keep the focus on Summer, and it is true. She's been missing for 54 days. And there's all of this nonsense going on online. There's all of this noise and nonsense, and there doesn't seem to be any police activity, no arrest, no urgency. But I think there's a method to that. I think the idea is that people get relaxed and loose lips sink ships, as I said earlier. I just want to thank Raymond, you for that $20 super chat. Also, Lauren Noel Hall. I wonder where you're from, given all those little circles on your name. Are you from Norway? Anyway, she says, bless all your hearts. And little Summer Wells, we have for you. Thanks everyone in this community with positive vibes for Summer. Summer's been missing 54 days now. And all we're hearing from is from Don. We heard a little bit from Candace with Chris McDonough, but then she's been silent since then. And now it's been Don. Don is seems to be lighting fires and putting them out, I think he's also blocked me on Facebook. I'm can't seem to find him on Facebook, so I guess I haven't ever left a comment there, so I guess that's another side of it. I also find it interesting that he spoke on Facebook Messenger, according to him, with Candace on the way home. Why wouldn't you talk on the phone if it was an emergency? In an emergency, why wouldn't you? Now, I know in almost all of these issues where you have a problem, someone's going to say, because they're poor. I don't know if that applies in an emergency where you go, okay, I don't know. Not sure. A tough one. What do you guys think? Do you think the poverty argument, Bria, do you think the poverty argument works for, call 911, okay, well, let's deal with the rest on Messenger? Because one thing about dealing with it on Messenger, you might think our correspondence isn't going to be texts and things. People aren't going to be able to see it necessarily.
I don't know. I don't know. I think that it would be nice to know if they actually have, if the TBI still has their telephones and whatever even happened with that. And we have heard the rumor that the text messages and all of the phone data, everything has been was deleted off their phones, which were then given back to them within a few days. And now they have their phones, but everything's been deleted. They've let us know that already. I think that is strange. What's been deleted? What exactly are they talking about? We don't have any phone data review. There's no news about what happened. And I do believe that what you said as well, TCRS, that, the phone data review also will be a big part of this story. And just like a lot of these other posts, and I mean, if Facebook posts and this sort of thing is telling us anything, then the phone data review, right? So we'll have to see what happens with that. Yeah.
So Stephanie, I don't know if you caught this, but Chris McDonough did say something like, when you extract data off the phone, it will remove it. But he said they wouldn't have given the phones back. Like in the Chris Watts case, they didn't give him his phone back. So that seems a bit tricksy from Don to say, we got our phones back and it's all wiped. Really, did you get your phones back? And Don does seem to do that a lot. He sort of gives you he scores a point, but then when you go and follow it up, for example, when he said, hey guys, unfortunately we've got to cut this prayer vigil short, we've got to go and see private detective. So scoring a point there, meanwhile, not quite when you go and check the information, right?
A lot of half-truths.
Yeah. So that's also something that I think we're starting to get to know Don better. We're getting to know the style that he operates in, how he if he's a little bit economical, how he does that. He minimizes certain things and he exaggerates other things. What I think is quite an interesting point from a very broad true crime perspective, from a very almost stepping completely out of the Wells case, is this idea of, we get from law enforcement saying, you know what, we're getting a lot of interference from social media. There are a lot of rumors and noise and whatever. But let me just ask the question, who is responsible for a lot of that? I mean, sometimes it is YouTubers. Sometimes it is, we know in the Chris Watts case, there was a lot of that. But this is very early in the Summer Wells case. Who do you think is the source of a lot of that noise and interference, right? In other words, where are these rumors and stories coming from? And then they've got to be corrected and then corrected again and corrected again. Where are they coming from? So, you can legitimately say social media is creating noise and interference, but I think you've also got to say, well, is anyone else? The social media is just putting it there, but who is putting it there? Who's the source of that noise? And what is the point of that interference? Let me say that again. What is the point of that interference? ... Isn't it kind of obvious? And I've been saying for quite a long time now, we're talking about, can you see the woods for the trees? Well, one way to keep going into the trees is to have constant interference, interfering with your ability to see the woods. You go back into the trees. Do you know what I mean? Isn't that by design? Isn't that the idea that you don't know what is going on? You're really confused. Isn't that by design? You don't know what is. And I heard another creator saying, I think I need to step out of this case because I have no clue what is going on now. I'm going to leave it to Chris McDonough. And I think Chris McDonough said, please, we need everybody on board, kind of thing. But it's just a sense of, it's so noisy and murky and smoky. But isn't that by design? Just on this concept of the red truck, now we find out that there's a red truck there that morning.
Don put that there in the story too.
Yeah. So if we come back to the sheds, even the sheds, there's like, wow, which shed are we even talking about? Is it this shed, that shed, which shed? And so I'm just going to quote from my notes. This is Don's reaction, not mine. This is Don's words, not mine. Don said he was angry about the shed. He said he was really upset. He called Chris McDonough real unprofessional, meaning I think what he was upset about was Chris McDonough said, "Can I go and look at the shed over there?" And Candace said, "No, no one goes into that shed, not even the boys," which is already like weird. Like, what's wrong with the shed? And that's not even the shed we are worried about. We're worried about the shed down by the creek. So what was in that shed? But I don't think there's anything wrong with Chris McDonough saying, what's the deal with the shed? And Don getting really angry about that, Don saying, "I'm really upset and that was really unprofessional when we allowed you onto our property." Also in that same interview, he said, "I've got nothing to hide." Okay, well then, why was there a problem going into the shed? I've got nothing to hide. Okay, well, let's look into the shed. What's the problem with the shed? And the reality is there is a problem with the shed. And the problem is you get an emergency call, Summer's missing, come home, you drive 30 minutes, a route that normally takes 45 minutes, and the first place you go to is the shed, but then you don't go in the shed. But then you did go in the shed, you just can't remember when you went into the shed. Why on earth is your first port of call the shed, but you never even go in the shed? What is going on there? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense that you would immediately know there's an abductor and then go somewhere in order to not do anything. So if you imagine,
and he scapegoated the boys as well, placing them also there at the shed as well. Another time he placed them at the shed just in case he needed to, I don't know, use them again in his story. Well, I went there because, well, the boys were down there because they were looking, so that was how I ended up going to the shed. He used them again.
I just wrote here, the lower shed is a problem with a line under that is. I don't know whether the upper shed is as well. I wouldn't be surprised if both sheds are a problem. But Don getting angry about it actually doesn't make any sense. You're just saying, why don't we know about, you showed us everything, but you didn't show us that, what's going on there. If it's not a problem, come, show us the shed. We still haven't seen inside of the shed.
Right.
But the other thing that I think is also, the other thing that's quite interesting is, to me, the mentioning of the creek. Now, I don't know whether that is misdirection or does the creek have a role in this as a distribution network, as something that something can move from A to B, right? Why was the first place he went to? Is he acknowledging that he went to the creek on June 15th? Why were you at the creek? Or is the creek taking us away from the shed? Or does something move from the shed to the creek? Or does something go not in either of those places into a vehicle somewhere else? You see how
he places the boys by the creek too.
Yeah, you see how something that should be simple is becoming more and more trees. Which we don't know which way to go. So I just want to mention that the two individuals that Don mentioned, the one was Richard Tucker, his boss. I found it really interesting that he mentions them by name, but not the people that he really suspects. Like, why would you not mention them by name? Why wouldn't you say, this person was at my house that day? Why can't you just say that? He said he had a long conversation with his boss that day. Then there's also Jamie Killian, who is, I guess, his alibi witness. But he kind of says that he got a call and then he loaded his tools. To me, that just it's a bit of a mismatch. I could be wrong. I'm just saying it's something that sets off a little bit of
a conversation with his boss about why did you drive the Subaru to work? That it was odd that he drove the Subaru to work with all his messy tools.
even his boss is kind of going, it's a bit weird that you're driving this vehicle. So, and vehicles were a problem in the Letitia Store case. She was driving different vehicles then as well. Bria?
I was just thinking just now, I mean, again, coming back to another discrepancy in Dawn's story, in everybody's story, to the question, was Dawn even at work that day? Because I'm just thinking now, like, if he wasn't at work, and if he ended up taking a different vehicle that he wasn't planning on driving that day, suddenly he gets a call, he's at the house, he jumps in another vehicle, gee, I need to get something from the job site. He goes to make it look like he was maybe getting some of his tools. He throws them in the truck, talks to his boss, this and that, he's got to go. And, maybe his boss just thought something was strange about him coming and putting the tools in. We don't really know exactly what the boss saw that day, or if he really was at work, or for how long, or, maybe he did go back there and throw some things in the truck and make it seem as if he was grabbing.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I think that's an excellent point, is him driving that vehicle. Doesn't that show that he didn't intend to go to work? I think that's a really, really good point. Again, it could not be relevant. It could be wrong. It could be that he just felt like driving that vehicle. But it's, number one, it's a new vehicle. And number two, even his boss was like, wow, do you really want to put that stuff in there? And one's also got to wonder, if you take the Casey Anthony case, you had debris and pizza boxes in the trunk area to cover over something else. So could you have something like that where it's not so much that you need to use the tools for a specific purpose, but to cover something? You've got something underneath the tools. You're not using the tools to dig or whatever. The tools are just to cover something else. But it's still kind of ignominious. It doesn't belong there. Why are those tools in that car? Well, could it be because Summer was in that car? And another thing that I've thought about, and certainly not an area I'd really want to go down, but could the whole swimming whole thing be a misdirection? Could the time of all of that be a misdirection? Could it actually be that we're supposed to think about the swimming hole, supposed to think about Candace, supposed to think about Grandma, meanwhile something else happened, and that takes you somewhere completely different? Could it be that Summer did wake up and then arrived home, and then something did happen at home, not with Candace, not with Grandma, and ... And then after that, Don maybe went to work to do whatever. I don't know. I'm just saying, Don driving that vehicle that day seems a bit odd. I think the other question to ask, had he ever driven that vehicle to work prior to that day? Had he ever gone to work in that vehicle? Because if not, then that's a serious problem. But what does it mean? Where does it actually take you?
It was odd to his boss. It was strange to his boss if he actually did see him. And then he also brings in the coworker that there's a possibility that he was carpooling with someone. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he puts this other worker on the property carpooling with him, going into work together.
But when was that, though? That same exact day?
Well, at first it was implied, I thought that it was implied that it was on June 15th. And then Chris McDonough was like, wait, and he was like, oh, no, that was earlier. So it's another contradiction.
It is another contradiction, exactly. And Don's reasoning too, what the reason he gave for why he was driving that vehicle, he said, well, I'm paying this big car note on it, this big insurance bill, so I thought I'd just drive it. That's what he said, the reason why. When he was questioned about why he was driving that vehicle, he said, well, I'm paying this insurance, so I got to just drive it. May as well be driving it. I don't know if that means anything.
This conversation is about was he at work or wasn't he? And when he wasn't at work, where was he? And when he was at home, when did he get home? So that basically the whole thing is, Don, where are you? And where were you where were you when at a particular time? And he acknowledges, certainly in his last interview, he says, yeah, well, he was out by an hour. That's quite a long time. Quite a lot can happen in an hour. Yeah, it's like he forgot that a 911 call is kind of timestamped, and that is when he was supposed to, like his story, he's actually said this quite a few times, was that Candace called him, told him what was going on, and he said, hang up and call 911. And it's kind of like instant. Like the moment after that, call 911. Well, she called 911 at 6:30, which would make you think that, did he get home at 7:10 or 7? That's, so if he found out kind of right then and he left work right then he should have got home at about 7. But the impression I get is that he actually got there before the cops got there, which means that, well, his story is not straight. He doesn't have his story straight. What is also interesting, for me, the biggest red flag of his last interview, his last epic fail, was where he said, you know what, maybe there was one or two policemen there. It was sort of like, yeah, when I got there, no one was there. And then he sort of says, well, yeah, maybe there was one or two. Well, I think if it's an emergency, you would know the cops are there or the cops aren't there. You wouldn't not know. They're either there or they're not there. Another thing I thought was really significant was he sort of complains. He says, you know what? So first of all, when he gets there, they're not there. Then the next thing, it's bottlenecked. Then there are too many police. And then if you contrast that to what he said much earlier, he said, you know what the police should have done? They should have sealed off Beach Creek Road from the one end to the other end. So now it's like, Don, what are you actually saying here? Like, what is he saying? The impression I get is that he, and I think Chris McDonough knows this, is that he actually arrived there after the police got there, unless he'd been there all along. And if that's true, then he's got to provide a story that isn't provided yet. So if Candace has said, Summer went from there to there, and I watched her, and we were planting flowers, but Don was actually there all along. Where were you, Don? What were you doing? Were you in the sheds? Were you at the creek? Were you what? And then did you drive Candace's car at one point? Why did you drive her car? Why didn't you drive your own car?
Do you think that that Don drove past the house and the driveway because the law enforcement was there and they had blocked it off? Because that's one of the things that they're supposed to do is prevent anyone from coming in and from leaving the house. So he might not have been able to get off his driveway.
My understanding is he, just keeping it simple, he drove to the shed by the creek on June the 15th. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. And I really don't think the police were there, and he drove right by them to the creek. If that did happen, it's a Chris Watts type situation where you're like, wow, you really did this in the full view of the police. So, I can't explain all sorts of behavior, but that wouldn't be very sensible, but it's possibly did that. What I think is more significant is whoever was there or wasn't there, and I suspect the police weren't there, that he went down to that shed when the police weren't there and did who knows what, got rid of who knows what. I don't know if the creek was relevant or not, but the fact is, in his own version of events, he went there. And I think that is hugely significant, because it doesn't really make sense. If your child disappeared from your home, surely you would start looking kind of around the home. You wouldn't immediately just sort of go somewhere else. That property is quite big and it's a small child. And when you also want to find out directly from Candace, okay, where should we go? Now you could say, well, he was getting the information regardless, but it's a little bit different when you're with someone face to face and you see where they are and they say, yeah, no, I've already looked there or whatever. So I do think that is pretty significant that he went down to that shed. And the question is, what was in that shed? I do think that, he said at the end of this interview, he said, I've got nothing to hide. But doesn't he? Doesn't he have something to hide? Isn't someone missing for 54 days because there's a lot that needs to be hidden? He says here, you have no reason to hide on your own property. That was actually which was quite interesting. Some of the creators on the channel were really nice to him. They actually seemed like they genuinely like him and care about him. And apparently the one actually texted him when they saw Chris McDonough going into the home, and he said, what are you doing? And, you need a lawyer or whatever. And then he said, and apparently he forgot that he said this, but he said, I have no reason to hide on my own property. But is that true? He's hidden before. He's got a criminal record. Is it true that he's got nothing to hide? What about Summer? Is someone hiding Summer? It sure feels like that. Someone doesn't just disappear. So I wrote this down. I made these notes. I can hear the fear and anxiety in her voice. This was when Candace called him. She's terrified. And so if he hears the fear, he hears the anxiety, he hears she's terrified, he immediately realizes an abduction. And the first thing he does is he packs up his tools. And his boss says, why on earth are you packing your tools in that new car? Then he drives, and it's an emergency, and he realizes an abductor. And the first thing that he does is he goes where there's sort of nobody, right? You can say that the boys were there, maybe they were, I don't know, but he goes to an obscure area that we didn't even really know about. Like we were like, where's the shed? And that is a kind of a problem. It's not, I don't want to say it's not reasonable behavior, but it doesn't feel sensible somehow. You would think that the first thing he would want to do is actually talk to the police, that he'd want to say, Summer's missing, please help, this is the situation. Or another thing would be to check the house and the grounds himself, starting from the house itself. I mean, if I hate to put this in your respective homes, but if one of your children went missing in terms of from the home, wouldn't you start looking in the home?
Absolutely.
Isn't that they could be playing hide and go seek. They could have fallen asleep. There could be a lot of innocent explanations.
And if I was at work, the last thing I would be thinking about is, oh, let me get my tools and bring them home with me. I would be booking it so fast to get home and find my children or my child.
The other thing that was quite interesting is he apparently called 911 as well. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So he calls 911, but then he reverts to Facebook Messenger with Candace. Now, I wanted to raise this point earlier where you say, give them a break. They're poor. They're gonna use. I don't really know what is cheaper, using mobile data or whatever to Facebook Messenger while you're driving, or actually call. I don't know which one would be cheaper. Maybe it's the same if you're using, WhatsApp or whatever it is. But why would he be worrying about how much something costs when they've got satellite TV? He's just bought a new car. I don't know. Something else that I think is quite interesting is Don said he stands to inherit his father's house. So he inherited his mother's house from his mother, but he actually also stands to inherit his father's house, where he was saying he was going to sell the house that they've got and use that to pay off what remains to be paid off with his father's house. Now, apparently his father is upset about everything that's happened, and I think he feels like he's going to be disowned. So, you know, if we're sitting here thinking, you know, this is crazy, it doesn't make any sense to be on all of these YouTube channels, Don might actually be thinking, I could win or lose a house based on what I say, based on my words, based on sentiment. I could lose a house or get a house. I wonder whether that's not playing in Don's mind more than other things.
Is it okay if we just go to the chat? There's been some super chats that some people are commenting, saying that they had some questions or something like that.
I'm not seeing any super chats here, to be honest. I think I missed that.
Right. So, yikes. Yeah. She said she had some questions and super chats, and also
Who's that?
Susan Becker, KIU, aka Kirstine. She said she made 2 super chats and they were unacknowledged. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I don't have the chat open today because last time I was completely distracted and I didn't want to be just doing this the whole time. So I don't even have chat up. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
It definitely is difficult. Sharon Tuck, I don't know if you're there. Can you just show us the question? I saw one super chat from Christine, but I don't know what if a question was asked.
Maybe we could go back. I could help you and write down the questions that were asked with the super chats, and you could address them.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sharon says I'll copy the super chat messages, so that's cool. Yeah, so you guys will just bear in mind when we use the StreamYard format, I'm trying to see whether Stephanie's about to say something or if she's starting to look bored, and what Bria's doing, and then it's really hard to keep track on everything. And I've also got to be like, am I talking too much? Right, and I'm also trying to get through the stuff that we're trying to get through. So it's a little bit new for us, certainly new for me. So
I'll go back and write down the questions, and I'll send them to you, Nick, so that you can make sure that you either write a post or a quick little video addressing some of them.
Okay, so Sharon Tuck says,
I am on the chat. Oh, did she write back? Did they end up writing their questions? I was on the chat and I've been modding at the same time, sorry. And somebody just mentioned something that I thought was really interesting. They said that, what about keeping dogs in those sheds? We know that they were breeding dogs and having a lot of dogs. They could have had some dogs in some sheds. Somebody mentioned that. Just wanted to put that out there.
Mm-hmm. They had them under the house too, remember?
Yeah, something else that's to me very interesting is that whole, that it's almost like an escape hatch to me, out of this sort of basement area, that area where you can looks like you can get into the house through that hole on the side. I don't know, you know what I mean? It just seems like the other thing,
the
I think I
dogs go
mentioned
in there, and a lot of puppies.
The other thing, I think I mentioned it in our live, Stephanie. I said, what's quite weird with this house is when you approach it from the driveway, the sort of front door entrance is facing away from you. And that kind of makes sense from, like, if law enforcement had to come up that driveway and there's a drug addict or a drug user or someone who doesn't want to get caught, he can run out that entrance and no one will see him. He can run out that entrance, across the road, go down the hill and go to the road that's just down there and drive off or whatever. In other words, no one will see them come out to know that someone has run away. And I think it was Bria who said, all those dogs are like quite a good cheap security layer. Those dogs are there not to protect the children, they are there to protect drugs. They are there as an alarm system kind of thing. unfortunately, that
Well,
doesn't quite work in
everyone.
an abduction. Eh?
Well, not that they're not there to protect the family, but just the property, their territory, let's just say, including the family, I think. I think that that's also the idea when you get dogs, and especially maybe several dogs that are kind of keeping, holding down the fort, if you will. I think it's to protect you, your family, and their territory. It becomes their territory. But I think that, yeah.
Can you talk to us about the dog packs you experienced in Thailand?
Yeah, I can. I did. I moved to Thailand and I had a unique experience observing some different types of dog packs. My experience was unique because I was living in a residential Thai neighborhood at the time, and I had to run 12 kilometers every morning, starting at 6 a.m. on the dot, and again in the afternoon at 3 p.m. But the morning runs, 12 kilometers, takes about an hour to run. That's about a little over 7 miles for American people, 12 kilometers. Right, so just shy of 7.5 miles every morning, 6 a.m. on the dot. They run before the sun comes out so that you're not running in the sun. You see a lot of dogs. They are very territorial during the 7 and so on mile run every morning. I would run through I at least probably 10 of these dog packs. And at the beginning, they're so territorial. They can, they know you're coming a mile away. That who's this foreign person coming through? Some of them were more docile, and some of them were more aggressive. At the beginning of these runs, the other boxers would be kind of around me, kind of fighting them off, and they slowly kind of taught me how I was going to have to make my way. They would be surrounding me, and little by little, I would, be going through. I had to learn which dog packs were more aggressive, and which ones would I'd have to pick my feet up a little bit, and what I would have to do. So every day I'd go back. I had a little apartment not far from the boxing camp, and there was also a dog congregation in my neighborhood. And this dog congregation, well, I definitely needed to get familiar with because I was living there. So they would say, bring some food and try to make friends with them. So I wasn't able to do that on my 12-kilometer run every day, but certainly the dogs around my around my neighborhood, I really had to try to get on their good side. I needed them to know me. It did take some practice. People in the community helped me out over several weeks and several months, to be honest. And the dogs were pretty lively at night, and sometimes they would be getting it. You would hear the dogs, up, and it would keep me awake at times. And I'd look out my window and I would see, kind of see what's going on out there. The dogs would be fighting over periods of time. And what I noticed was that so even though all of these dogs, they're so territorial, I saw them every single day. These dogs in exactly this territory. They don't cross over. Exactly these dogs in exactly this territory down here. I knew who they were. And what I noticed from observing the dogs is that when a female dog is in heat, it doesn't matter where these dogs are from. They come from high and low, from all different parts. They absolutely cannot help themselves. They come from far and wide, and they come for the female dogs. It's just one of their natural instincts. It's just something that they do. And so the reason why I wanted to talk about dogs was just not only about my observations and some of the things that I saw, but I just believe that the abduction narrative is completely done when you understand how dogs are, especially when they've been given the space to breed to become a pack, how that kind of happens. If you guys want, it's really interesting because it does kind of play into the narrative. And when you kind of understand a little bit more about dog packs and how they do that, maybe you can even understand a little bit more about Don and kind of what he's all about and what he's kind of been going on, what's kind of been going on around his property. I like to call it the ramshackle chalet. I like that word you used there. Yeah, the ramshackle chalet.
Eventually, there will be a term that everyone will choose, but I quite like the chalet wells, like not well chalet wells, almost like castle wells, and it's meant to be a little bit of a parody of that, I know, probably this case is going to go the route of the Chris Watts case, where eventually people are going to try and make other narratives up, and I predict one of the narratives is going to be that yes, the dogs could have all run away that day because there was a dog on heat that night or that day, and so they all ran away that day. And
right.
if Don's
so that's why I wanted to bring that up.
If Don's listening, he's probably writing that down, because that would be a great way to get rid of all the dogs, right? Where that breaks down a little bit is, well, there were dogs with puppies there right now, and so you don't really go when that's the case. Certainly not that dog, the female. I don't know whether the male dog who sired those puppies would also go run off. I don't know. I'm not an expert in dog behavior, but the other side of the story, not that it's strictly relevant, is when Chris McDonough went there, well, there were dogs there. When he went there, there were the dogs. They weren't not there. Of course, it's several days later. But also when the Sermon on the Mount happened, well, there were dogs there. They weren't not there. And then I think the critical question is, when the police were there that day, were there dogs there? And I can almost guarantee you that the dogs were there. And it might be Officer James, were there dogs here? He'll be on the stand. Officer James, were there dogs here? Yes. Officer Michaels, were there dogs here? Yes. You might even see them in photos, and then Don might say, no, they weren't there. And then someone's got to decide, well, what's the truth here? But, I think even Chris McDonough said, and to me, this sort of sketches the scene in a way. He said the boys were, this is when the police were on the property, I think on June 15th. The boys were there throwing around a football. Now, that doesn't give to me the idea that even the boys were aware of an emergency. It kind of gives me the idea that the boys were kept out of everything, right? I don't think the boys ran down to the shed looking for Summer. In fact, I would wonder whether the boys even knew anyone was looking for Summer. The boys may have been, where's Summer? And I don't know what they said to her, but I kind of just get the sense of the boys throwing a ball around. Unless I'm misunderstanding, I understood this was on June 15th when the police arrived. That doesn't give me the sense that they were worried or concerned, or there's this big traumatic event playing out right now. You kind of get the sense that they have been kept out of the loop somehow, which I think is interesting in itself. I think another interesting question is, if you ask the boys individually, I'm not going to say their names, but you ask the one boy, were the dogs there that night? I don't know if they would remember that night, but, do you remember the dogs being there? Yes, I do. Do you? Yeah, I played with that one, whatever. But I predict that you're going to have all sorts of spinnings going on, and one of them, well, you could have had a dog on heat, and so all of the dogs evacuated that day of all day.
Well, the dogs were there because dogs are very territorial. At the end of the day, they're very territorial. They would have never all left at the same time, and especially, as you said, because there was puppies, and as far as I recall, there was 3 sets of puppies on that property at the time that Summer disappeared. 3 sets of puppies. Of course, the female dogs would never leave their puppies, and they would even appoint other dogs of the pack to stay behind if any of the dogs did leave for any reason. I did want to bring that up because when Dawn said, oh, gee, the dogs leave for a few days, they come back all tired and beat up and hungry, and we don't know where they go. I mean, it's possible that some of the dogs could be gone, but a dog congregation of the size that he has going on at the Ramshackle Chalet, I don't see it. I just can't see. There's no way that all of those dogs would have left. There certainly would have been dogs there, and they would have been there protecting. We all saw them with our own eyes, barking, bark, bark, bark. Mm-hmm. That's what dogs do. You know, they're territorial. They protect. They're there for a reason. They're not just there just because people, you know, drop them off. No, they're there.
Someone said,
he does talk about. Mm-hmm.
Someone said body cam footage. I think that is true. That should be sufficient.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I just want to address a question that came up that I thought was quite interesting. Someone said, I think it was a tweet. Someone said they called 911. They are talking to law enforcement. They were polygraphed, and then they said, "You must be crazy to think he's not innocent." So in other words, you know, how on earth can you know, what is the problem here? You know, they called 911, they've done everything. What more do you want, right? The problem here is, number one, that Summer's been missing for 54 days without sufficient explanation. Even law enforcement are saying this is unusual. They're saying a case like this you tend to know which direction to go in very early on. Law enforcement haven't said it's not an abduction, but I think if they thought it was an abduction, they would have said so a long time ago, because it would be important to warn other people. It would be quite important to inform the public, because there would be a danger to other children, an ongoing, a present danger kind of thing. And they haven't done that. I heard a channel saying something like law enforcement's official position is that they don't have a person of interest. I read between the lines with that. Like, are you telling me that you would polygraph some people 2-3 times, but they are not a person of interest? For example, in the Chris Watts case, in the Chris Watts case, who is polygraphed? Only Chris Watts. In the Rebecca Zahal case, who was polygraphed? Adam Shacknai. I'm not really aware of anybody else. Could be wrong, and what happened in that case, and so on and so on and so on. The police don't polygraph when they are like, I'm not saying they will, you know, everyone they polygraph is guilty, but they tend to be interested in the people they polygraph. In the John Benet Ramsey case, who were polygraphed in that case? The Ramseys. So let's just look at this. Susan Becker, I agree the dogs were there, Bria. Okay. So to address that, the other problem with everything is the timeline is it's like Swiss cheese. The timeline is very poor. And there are a lot of contradictions. Don says one thing one day and another thing another day. The police weren't there, then maybe they were there. You know, so it's these contradictions and the timeline that are a serious problem. Why is he driving a certain vehicle that he would never drive otherwise? Why on that day of all days does the car disappear? And then there are other things that, you know, you can't like quickly answer that question, but to say, well, let's go into Don's backstory. Have there been disconcerting events that took place in his backstory with young girls? ... Is SA part of this narrative, and so on? And you know, there's it's kind of like a minefield. It's not so much what isn't there, but what is there. You know, where do you draw the boundary to this drug narrative? It just seems to get wider and wider and wider, further and further and further. And you know, again, it's the subject of this live stream. Where was Don on the 15th? Can we not just get clarity that that he went to work, and when he got back from work? How hard is that?
Don was asked if he was cleared. He wasn't even sure that it was verified.
Yeah, that's true. He said something like, I'm not sure if it's verified, blah, blah, blah. Well, either it is or it's not. And, you know, something that I think is very misunderstood in true crime is if you are a suspect, you either have an alibi or you don't. It's as simple as that, right? You either have an alibi or you don't have an alibi. Now, one case where, and I hate to do this because it usually is fairly simple, but one case where someone did have an alibi and they were found guilty was Stephen Avery. Stephen Avery had an alibi for the crime that he was sent to jail for. You know, like he was like, I was at the store, and I think there were a couple of alibis, he had receipts, and because he had done so many other things, people thought he did that particular crime, and then he didn't. And he was due to get a big reimbursement for you know, an unlawful, you know, being in jail unlawfully, basically. He was going to get compensation, but so that's kind of an exception. But basically, that's one of the key tools an investigator will use is, do you have an alibi? When this happened, where were you? And you look at the Amanda Knox case, it should be a very simple question. Do you have an alibi or not? And if you go to the Amanda Knox case, well, she has, then she doesn't, then she has again. Why isn't it not simpler than that? And there's also a drug narrative to that case. So in this case, it's quite a serious question to say, well, where was Don? And we've got the same problem with Candace, because we say, Candace, between when you called 911, which was 6:30, and when you were at the swimming hole, which was until about 2:30, what was going on for 4 hours? What was going on in those 4 hours? You weren't planting flowers for 4 hours. So what was really going on? And that's why the problem is in the timeline.
Sorry to cut you off. The timeline. Sorry to cut you off, but it would have been earlier than 2:30 because they said that they dropped Macbeth off between 2 and 2:30, and he says they were sitting in the parking lot of the store for an hour. She says 5 minutes, but we know that they must have left before that. If they made some stops after the swimming hole, we know that they did some stops first. They made some stops.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Stephanie, do you want to speak more about your experience with opiates?
What would you like me to speak?
When you were a kid.
Okay. I'm gonna read it if that's okay, because it's kind of emotional for me.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. It's my first pharmacy opioid experience. Our pharmacy is a family-owned business, one my grandfather opened 57 years ago. I spent much of my childhood in the pharmacy helping my dad and Grandpa Pat. At the time, we had a soda fountain in the pharmacy. Customers would sit at the counter and have an ice cream soda while waiting for the prescriptions to be filled. I remember washing a lot of cold, sticky ice cream dishes. I also remember being treated to a lot of ice cream cones. I have many fond memories growing up, a part of the family business, but also a particularly haunting one. When I was 6 years old, a year older than Summer, I witnessed my father being held at gunpoint in his pharmacy. My father went out back to throw some trash out into the dumpster. A man with a nylon stocking over his face and a gun in his hand grabbed my dad from behind and began making demands. He had my dad open the registers and the safe to the narcotics. I heard shuffling on the basement steps, and timidly I went back to see what was taking my dad so long. I saw two of my dad's workers sitting in the dark at the bottom of the basement stairs and my father about halfway down. I heard my father begging for his life, my life, and the lives of his workers. He told the man to take anything he wanted, to take all the money, and all the drugs and pleaded for him not to hurt us. As I stood at the top of the stairs while the man held the gun to my father's temple, I asked my dad what they were doing. The man with a stocking over his face told my dad, "Tell the little girl we're playing a game." My dad repeated that to me and told me to quietly come down the back stairs to the basement, where we were handcuffed in the dark for hours. Even though I knew something was very wrong, I had listened to my dad and followed them down. We were rescued a few hours later when customers calling the pharmacy got no answers and customers coming to pick up their meds called out loud for us. Multiple customers called 911. The police arrived, cut off the handcuffs. They asked me what happened and if I had been scared. They gave me a soda, it was a Coca-Cola, and sat with me while my dad was questioned and gave a description of the suspect the best he could. I witnessed my dad, the most vulnerable I've ever seen him, but also the bravest. I remember my parents letting me sleep in their bed that night in between the two of them. The following month, my dad heard on the news that a pharmacist a few towns over had been shot and killed by an armed robber. The pharmacist had fought back. I overheard my parents discussing it and crying and saying how lucky we were. It could have been us. Only my dad didn't fight back. We thought about that man and the family he left behind and cried some more. The man who robbed my dad was later caught and spent a number of years in prison. He was a drug addict, desperate for his next fix. When he was questioned by the police, he told them, "Tell the little girl I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare her." I remember that day like it happened yesterday. It's always kind of in the back of my mind. Today, as I write this and I read this aloud to you, I can't help but wonder what Summer witnessed. What might she have felt? Was she scared? For me, my experience was a day, a couple of hours at the hands of a scary stranger. For Summer, it wasn't just a couple of hours on June 15th. It was days, possibly months, likely years. And worst of all, it appears, in my opinion, her fear and suffering was at the hands of the very person or persons who should have protected her the most.
I've heard this before, so it's maybe not as much news to me as it is to others. But there've been some pretty unkind comments while Stephanie was talking, just saying, what has this got to do with Summer? Well, it's actually got quite a lot to do with it. First of all, the lengths people will go to get hold of opiates, right? That it's like a life and death thing. That is how serious it is, that you're willing to wipe out or risk someone's family to get them. Something else that you may have noticed if you're paying attention, or you may not have noticed, Stephanie is quite emotional about something that wasn't an abduction, but it's like a violation of your safe space. Nothing really happened, there were no long-term injuries to her or to her father, but it's nevertheless traumatic in the sense that your concept of a safe environment, of your father as a protector, that sense of security is sort of torn apart, right? And even just remembering that something that is, let's say, fairly, I don't want to say benign, but, compared to an abduction, it's still traumatic, and you're going to tremble and be emotional thinking about it, right? And so when you compare, how old were you, Stephanie, when this happened?
6.
So quite a few years have gone by. We won't go into that area, but quite a few years have gone by. And people have said with Candace, well, the reason she wasn't emotional is because she was on this substance, or she's numb, or whatever. And people keep making those things. Well, here is a genuine person who had something happen to her, and she's still emotional many years later, and something much milder by comparison, right? that is the genuine emotion. It actually creeps up on you and it wants to overwhelm you. It's very difficult to hold it back. And yet what you're seeing in these cases are them holding back that kind of emotion effortlessly, right? In the Madeleine McCann case, you had the parents saying, oh, we were told not to be emotional. So it's like, wow. So you were told and you just did it. And wow, that's really incredible. You guys, I mean, that's not how emotion works. Even when you try and hold it back, it wells up on you and you can't hold it back. Heather O'Brien says to Stephanie, thanks for being you.
Oh, thanks.
That's a wonderful sentiment there. So it is relevant. It's relevant in quite a few ways. It's also relevant in probably to some extent something like that. Credit to Stephanie and her. I don't know if you guys caught where this guy's got a gun in his hand and he says to, I think, Stephanie's dad, tell your daughter to come down here. What would have happened if Stephanie turned around and ran away? That guy probably would have panicked. All sorts of horrible things could have happened. And in one of those weird things, you're almost inexplicably paralyzed. You do something and it ends up being fortuitous. Stephanie went down the stairs. This person felt kind of reassured that he was in control, and so nobody got hurt. Then he was, I don't know if it was him, as far as I understand what you said, Stephanie, it was another person who attacked this other guy. He didn't feel like he was in control. And a drug addict is feeling more and more unhinged. And if someone is kind of making that worse, they're going to feel trigger happy, I think. But if they feel like someone is just making their lives easier, well, then that's fine, right? So it does actually have a bearing here. And I think the biggest thing is if you see this emotion from Stephanie, that's genuine emotion. For something compared to what happened with Summer Wells is a totally different situation. But, you know, I've been broken into and I've felt, and I've had some friends of mine broken into, and I felt your home is no longer safe. It's a horrible feeling. You feel violated, even though nobody touched you, but you feel violated. You don't actually want to live there anymore. And you don't really get any of that sense of indignation or trauma in this case so far.
I also think that as an adult, it's and being, you know, looking into all these true crime cases, it hit me like more than when I was a little kid. The gravity of what happened and what might have happened, and also having children and just imagining what my dad experienced and how he kept it together to keep us alive.
My father and my sister were in a situation like that where they, I think, wanted to rob them and then told them to lie down and they just listened to everything. And I must say there's a part of me that wonders, should you cooperate? Should you make yourself completely vulnerable? And then you can you can have your life taken if that's what they decide to do. I know for a fact that there are some cases where people did fight and they won and they survived. You just don't know. It's kind of the luck of the draw. I have heard in general people say you shouldn't resist. You should be completely cooperative. I'm not sure I like that sort of global response, but they do say in most situations you should just cooperate. I think if you're ever in that situation, I think probably cooperate, but also try and think as well, like, you know, what is going to be the best scenario here. Ellie, let's just deal with a couple of comments. I'm going to ask Bria to respond to a couple of them. Heather said Summer didn't have a choice. She had to cooperate. Ellie says dogs are weapons. Barbie says, no, you don't cooperate. Bridget says, don't leave with them for sure. Yeah. Caitlin, has Grandma been interviewed by anyone other than the police? No. That is something that I think a lot of people are sort of wanting. I think Grandma is becoming the Oscar moment of this case at the moment. She holds the keys to the kingdom, I think, in a way. So one wonders whether Grandma's going to say anything. And I just get the feeling there are a lot of skeletons in the closet, and it's just easier to keep them there. Fiona says, Finola says, Grandis knows. Kelly Girl says, thanks for sharing. Bria, I think, do you want to read through some of the comments? You can respond to some of them.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to read some comments. I have seen in some of the comments when we were talking earlier about the sheds and some of the drugs in Tennessee. I mentioned a lot of people in the comments saying in Tennessee it's fentanyl and oxy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what everyone kept saying. So I don't know if anyone wanted to talk. Everyone's saying right now. They said right now in Tennessee, fentanyl and oxy. Is that what you guys said in the comments? That's what I thought. I saw that a lot in the comments.
Now the people from there will know best. The people from there will know best.
Right. Absolutely.
I just want to quickly read this. Someone asked, who is Don's alibi? That's quite a good question. Like specifically, I mean, maybe Don needs to be asked that question.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether his answer is Jamie Wilson and Richard Tucker. I don't know if he considers them his alibi. Bear in mind, him making an appearance at work. I don't know if that counts. Yeah.
Also, too, just staying on topic with Don's whereabouts, where was Don on June 15th? I was thinking, we were talking about that earlier, and we've been talking all over Patreon about this. But the last photo, which I know you've been saying since right out day one almost, that the last photo is the game changer. And there are some discrepancies and some contradictions, rather, in Don's statements about the last photo and just where he was that day. He says when he woke up in bed, he was in bed and Summer was right there. What was she wearing? Mm. Oh, I can't really tell you. Okay, maybe he did. He says he went to work. But the thing is that he said in his interview, and again, we know that he kind of just sort of reiterates some of what Candace has told him, and he kind of says it as if he was actually there, like he right. saw her. But he says, he talks about her putting on the jumpsuit after the swimming because he said that she put on the jumpsuit, and he mentions that it was her school thing that she had picked out because she wanted to go to. She was planning on wearing it for the first day of school. He says that, but the boy Macbeth, when he talked about that, there was a major discrepancy that I actually just noticed today about the last photograph where we see her in the jumpsuit, the sweatsuit. In his interview at exactly 10 minutes, he talks about Summer getting changed. He says. She got changed from the swimming. Well, they brought her an outfit to put on because they were supposed to go to Jonesboro to the water park there. Yeah. And he mentions the water park. And then later on for 2 minutes, from 36 minutes to 38 minutes of his interview, he says he tests his mother in a major way, which I have been saying this, that I was saying that the two interviews with Allison and her girlfriends, and then with him, her son, actually they're in reverse. The second interview is actually the first interview. I believe that Chris sits down with the three women first and talks to them, and then they bring him in. Now they've already talked, and she's already let some of her opinions out. And then when they bring him in, he tests her a few times, and he tested her really big time with. When they talk about Summer getting dressed and changed at the house, he tested her and he said, Chris says, well, who got out of the car? Did you get out? And he says, well, I thought Summer got, he said, did I get out of the car or did we both get out? And Allison's silent. She doesn't say anything. She pauses. And so he pauses. Allison's silent. Chris steps in and he says, well, where were you sitting when, he said, where was Summer sitting when you got out? So where was she sitting? And she says, well, she was sitting in the middle. When I got out, she was sitting in the middle seat. And then he says, well, I wasn't really paying attention. Allison mumbles and she says, exactly. If you see her say exactly. And then he goes on with his narrative. And I think it's safe to say that he also tested her at another point. When
I just want to stop you. I just want to stop you there.
No problem.
But just in terms of what you're talking about there, Candace said she changed some at home before 8 o'clock. Like she said, wow, it was very hot, and so
they
we
were
put
going to
her
go
in
swimming.
a bathing suit. Yeah. So there's another problem right in the beginning of the day. Yeah.
There's a lot of problems with that, and which is why it makes me more think that something did happen that day at the swimming hole there, at the swimming cove that they were at, because there's so many discrepancies. If you really go back and listen to Macbeth's interview, he was definitely being a lot more misleading and just not as truthful, I think, as some people sort of gave him credit for, especially when you go back and you know that the interviews are actually in reverse. If you go back knowing that and watch them again, you can see how he tests his mother several times to see what she's going to say. And Allison, she let off a big clue when at first she said, which again, we're talking about the last photo, so we have to talk about the milk jugs, and we need to talk about her, if Summer really was sleeping on the milk jugs, if the terrain was so rough going up the driveway and you have to take a really sharp right to get up. Don't you think that she could have slid off, or the jugs could have fallen on the seat somehow? Just knowing when you get up to the driveway, that was one part of it. But yeah, there are just a lot of contradictions. And in the interview, he tests the mother to see what she's going to let out. And ultimately, she backpedals, and she ultimately doesn't really say, well, she says that the Summer was just exactly like that. When she said, I saw her with my own eyes. She was just like that laying in there. And he's saying she's awake, and I thought she got out, but she had already said that. So there's so many contradictions. It really makes me think that something definitely happened there that day. Not only that, but he admits to pulling her out of the water and that she was underneath it. The swimsuit, it does matter, because
to me the part that's the biggest red flag is a completely different person, not Macbeth, not Allison, not Candace, not Don. Someone completely different said that Summer was under the water for a minute, according to what I think she said Macbeth said to her, right? And then that had to be damage controlled by everybody else, right? So I kind of got the sense
and he had told his girlfriend as well, which is why I thought that he really needed to say something. It was too late to kind of just go back and say nothing happened, because he said he was shook, that he was worried. When he came back, he didn't come back in a state that was just, oh, gee. He came back, he needed to talk to his girlfriend, which he said he went and did.
Also heard that the trip was actually cut short because he was shaken up. That was sort of why it ended quite. If you think about it, coming home at 2 o'clock, it's kind of the middle of the day still when you were going to enjoy it by the river. It's like the heat of the day still. And where did they need to go when it's 2 o'clock except home? They didn't need to be anywhere. Nothing else was on the agenda. So why? So but the other thing was, that is something that ticks the box of something that can be life-threatening. Someone going underwater for quite a long period of time, especially a small child, can be life-threatening. And then you have that photo. If you didn't have the photo and you heard that story, it would be critical anyway, but now you've got the photo as well. And it's not just that she's slumped over and she's got her head on cold milk jugs and she's supposedly cold, and all the thing about hot and cold doesn't align either. So, and then even Candace's story about she was just 2 minutes from home, then, sorry, she was first 5 minutes from home, then 2 minutes from home. I went and checked where that video was taken, and I think she's about 11 minutes from home. So why, why are there all of these problems? So someone put up a comment which I think is excellent, and you do need to come back to this over and over again in cases like this. You've got to say, okay, well, if you are building a particular case, then what's the motive here? I'm not going to go explicitly into that, except to say, I don't think there's an intention to hurt Summer. I don't think someone said, we need to traffic Summer, we need to kill her or anything like that. I think something that happened to Summer happened unintentionally. I call it an accident, but an accident that was waiting to happen. What is an accident that's waiting to happen? It's an accident that you can foresee. It's predictable, it's preventable, based on previous incidents, previous behavior, behaving recklessly, right? And so you might say, well, so if it was an accident, then why couldn't they have taken Summer to the hospital? For a couple of reasons. Would you, like let's say you were in that situation, and I hope the answer is yes. But if you were in that situation and you were intoxicated and your child came to harm, would you say, well, I'm going to go to the hospital anyway, even though I'm a little bit intoxicated, I might get into trouble? But there are a lot of people who wouldn't. So if you're intoxicated and you arrive at the hospital, they might say, well, okay, you can't leave. We need you to address a certain thing. But that's not the end of the story. What if other things were going on with Summer that also needed to be addressed, that by other people, that could also get someone into trouble? And this is quite an interesting area that I haven't heard other people talking about. If SA is an issue in this case, so if you have a situation where Summer is sleeping in the same bed as Don and Candace, and something is happening between Don and Summer, are you telling me that Candace wouldn't have some responsibility in that scenario? If that is happening, wouldn't Candace be responsible in some way for not reporting something or not doing anything about it, ... And in a weird way, not quite the same, but in a weird way, it's possible that you have a similar type situation in the John Benet Ramsey case, where the charges they were indicted on, the parents, was that, child abuse resulting in death. In other words, you should have foreseen that something was going to happen, both of you. You knew certain things, you could have foreseen, you didn't do anything, so you are responsible for in that case, a 6-year-old child. In this case, a 5-year-old child. You had a duty of care that you didn't exercise, right? So the question of motive is an excellent question, but I think it's also important to answer it. I don't want to be too explicit about answering it, but I think you get what I'm talking about. I don't see intent in what happened to Summer. It's possible that I'm totally underestimating the case, and things are much bleaker, darker, and uglier than we even imagine. That's also possible. But at this point, especially if you consider the swimming hole scenario, I do think something happened unintentional, but what happened afterwards was intentional, is intentional, and possibly is being, we are being sent into the trees. We are being kept in the trees.
Post-meditation, is that what you call it?
That's it. Maybe we need a shirt on with that as well. Pre-meditation on the front, post-meditation at the back. I'm going to credit Bob Van Lara from Canada. He says, I know I've said this before. Don saying law enforcement stole his camera because they were the only ones in their home makes no sense to his abduction theory. I do think what Don's trying to do is make little digs at law enforcement here and there and everywhere. That law enforcement's not to be trusted. Law enforcement didn't do their job. Law enforcement botched investigations. A classic they are the scapegoat. Don't look at me. Don't look at that person. Look at law enforcement are at fault, and that just happens a lot. That happens a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
Someone says, why would grandma need help planting 4 cactuses? Well, maybe because of her knee, I don't know. It's quite interesting, and Bria and I don't know where you stand on this now, Bria, but I know we had a bit of a difference of opinion where we were talking about the flowers, and I said, I think the whole flower narrative is kind of that. It's like this flowery narrative that just doesn't actually exist. So when they were planting or they were picking flowers or looking for flowers at the swimming hole, I don't think any of that actually happened. When they were planting flowers at home, and now it seems to be cactuses, I don't really know, but to me, the flowers is actually like the tools. It's something that is an activity in place of what the real activity actually was. You've got to say something.
Right. I do agree with that. At the end, I mean, at the beginning, I was thinking something. There was something with the sheds. They talked about mud and dirt and dig and washing of hands when they came in, and the boys were they seemingly there, and they washed their hands, and they started their narrative with that. And I was trying to figure out, but as I got so stuck into that, I then realized, thanks also to TCRS, to be that real voice of reason, and to take us out of the murk, take us out of, when you get confused about something, and show us the truth that these are smoke and mirrors. I think it's pretty clear to see at this point that a lot of those things, I've seen over the last several weeks following this case, that they seem to throw in these flowers and candy and these nice words, and because I think at the base, everything that the actual content of what they're talking about is really sinister. It is really bad, and they kind of need these things to just
but I do
make
wonder,
things sound better than they really are.
I do wonder whether there's a psychological seed to, for example, if you say, of all the things you can choose to manufacture something about, flowers seems a little bit odd, but anyway, so what if the psychological seed to that is, they are actually growing flowers, plants, whatever, in a shed. They are actually doing that. They're actually, that is actually taking place. And so, so if you have a scenario where a lie is being manufactured, just hypothetically, I'm just speculating now. If you have this hypothetical story about planting flowers or plants, and the boys are told about it, right, after the fact, and then the police say to the boys, did someone ever plant plants or something? And no, we're planting plants all the time, They don't say what kind of plants, but the fact is plants were being planted. And so,
gardening.
So within that sort of schema, it's true, but there's a bit of a twist to it. But you're going to have the little boys saying, my dad was a really keen gardener. He was at it all the time. He'd come back from work and garden kind of thing, And so in drug culture, there's a lot of code words and keywords. We know in the Casey Anthony case, there was Zanny the nanny. It's a well-known kind of a joke, but it's actually, but if you're not in that thing, you don't really get it, right? But even just in a basic sense, if you think about this idea of planting flowers and the drug thing, it's quite interesting. And I kind of was trying to get into that psychology when I in a previous YouTube video where I touched on that song. If you go into the woods today, you're in for a big surprise. It's got that sort of jaunty quality that you might have if you're on drugs as well, It's sort of got that sort of funny, ethereal quality about it. You know, if you go into the woods today, it's a kind of like a jaunty thing. The whole thing, if you think about Candace, for example, she's luxuriating in this lifestyle. You know, they call opiates hillbilly heroin, right? And all of it is kind of a game to her. She dresses up like a gangster. She kind of describes herself as a badass on Facebook. She says she's had a relationship with marijuana since she's 13 on her Facebook. So that is part of her culture. And it's something that to some of us is quite foreign. We're not quite sure of the language, even the psychological language. And one wonders to what extent that, like planting flowers, is part of that psychological language, if that makes sense. So I don't think it's irrelevant. I just think in terms of the timeline, it's not what it pretends to be. That's all.
I also think it's possible that, oh, sorry, Stephanie, go ahead.
No, go right ahead. I'll go after.
I was just going to say that just about that. I do also think it's possible that, okay, guys, we got a situation, call up the drug dealer, a few other people that they're affiliated with, come up, get the plants out of there, whichever other paraphernalia they got going on, red truck comes, takes something. It's possible. It's possible, you know, that, and the people, these other guys, they may not have known for any reason why. They may have come and grab some plants or grab some material out. They could have come and picked other people too, not only Don, but things could have been removed from sheds, from property that day, if you know what was hitting the fan that day. It's possible. Sorry, go ahead.
We'll get you, Stephanie. I just want to read this comment. Kel says, it's not impossible to convict someone with no body. It happens all the time. That is true. Stephanie?
I was going to say, I can't help but notice the irony in not just the planting, but the candy, because Candace mentions that Grandma had given Summer a piece of candy. I don't know if something happened at the swimming hole and it was to manage something that was hurt. I don't know if it was to, maybe she was given a piece of candy to sedate so something else could be going on. But I also know that there are some really sketchy people that come into the pharmacy and you hear them talking outside about going into the pharmacy to the candy man, which is the pharmacist. So that's just something to take.
Absolutely, yeah. No,
don't you also think it's strange that the grandma's name is
Grandma Candy?
And the last thing that she did was give Summer candy, and then Summer disappears.
The whole thing
I also find that very strange, very weird.
Yeah, that is. That's very, very, very good point. Must say, well done. Something that came up in the last interview that Don gave. He was asked an excellent question. He was asked, you know. He's been asked this before, but he's asked it again, but this time he gave a different answer. He's asked, so what is the boundary for Summer's wandering around? Like, is it the boundary the swing? And I think this question came from Chasing Truth. She is actually an excellent, she asked a lot of excellent questions, very on the ball. And Don said something like this. He said, now bear in mind their position in the beginning was she would never wander off. They were quite adamant about that. She'll never want, and I was just like, a 5-year-old, it's like talking about a puppy. How can you say a puppy or 5-year-old would never wander off? They're wandering off constantly. That's what they do. But anyway, he said, I've seen her go down to the edge of the lawn. And I think when he says that, he means, I mean, if you take that lawn, it's lawn, all the way to the bottom. So he says, I've seen her go down to the edge of the lawn. And then he starts talking about bears. And he said something, just the way he spoke, it sounded like he was strongly believing that a bear could have taken her, that a bear was laying in wait, not an abductor, now a bear. It's just craziness, absolute craziness. But this is yet another adaptation. this is another adaptation where now Summer would wander off, but just to the edge of the lawn. So, you know, it's another version of events. So again, when you say, you know, I don't know what you are talking about. These people have called 911, they're cooperating. It's these small niggly things in areas where there doesn't need to be a problem. You know.
He also mentioned in the same interview, though, after saying that, but she would, you know, maybe if her brothers were outside, she would go out.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's a comment.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I did see a comment, and which I was just going to read out.
Thanks, Sheila. Yeah.
That Summer didn't eat. When did Summer eat that day? I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle missing. They were supposedly up at the hospital by 8 a.m. No talk about food whatsoever the whole day. Major boozing. I mean, medicating, but no eating. Someone mentioned that, and I mean, yes.
Just a slushy, supposedly.
To his credit, Chris McDonough said that. He said, I don't see any food in the story. You go to Sonic, you go to this spot, that spot, you go to Walgreens, you go to Priceless, and the only food we seem to see is milk. You know, something else that Don seemed to let slip was he was talking and then he just said the word midday and then he sort of covered it over. And if you just think about it, midday was when something happened on June the 15th. The middle of the day was when something happened, I think, to Summer, right? And that's really where we want to know where Don was. In the middle of the day, Don, where were you? Kind of the early afternoon part, not when the police saw him so much, although that's relevant. He'd also said, this part to me was just bizarre. He said, he was talking about how he was trying to almost teach Summer to be afraid or aware that there could be wild animals on the property.
Yeah,
so he said
weird.
he would sort of stalk her or creep up to her and then scare her. And these were his words. He said, I'd scare her to, and then I think he said, scare her to, and then he corrected himself. It sounded like he was going to say, scare her to death. And then he corrected himself to say, I'd scare the daylights out of her. Just seems totally unnecessary. You just could say, you know, be careful of the animals. I also thought what was quite weird was he was asked, describe your best memory of Summer. And then his best, I don't know what you guys think of this. You guys are mothers. If you have to think of your own children. Anyway, he said it was holding her. So this is what he says. My best memory of Summer was when I hold her hand and she twirled. And then he's talked about his arm getting tired. I don't know whether you would say something like, you know, I got tired in the middle of talking about your best memory. Like, I just don't know if, you know, do you think that way? I don't know if people would normally think that way. You know, it could be nitpicking. But the other thing that he said that just rang a small little bell was where he was talking about, and I'll obviously deal with some of these statements in more detail in the Sermon on the Mount, part 4. But he spoke about Summer, I think, running into him. I think he came back from work or something, not quite sure, but ran into him. And then he apparently had his hand on her chest, and he said he could feel her heart beating through her chest. And
that was part of his favorite memory.
Yeah, and that just made me think of what Chris Watts said. Chris Watts said something about he wanted his daughters to barrel rush him and sort of run into him. And you think about the memory itself, it's quite a violent sort of memory. It's a physical, violent memory. And you sort of wonder, is that what is featuring in this person's mind because of picking up a person and you know, a sort of physicality in terms of that? Because it's just an odd memory, if you ask me. It's, in the Madeleine McCann case, when Madeleine's father talks about the last time that he saw it, also, it sounds right, but somehow it misfires. It's difficult to say why. another thing that I thought was an excellent question from this channel, I'm not quite sure what their name is, I think it's Voice Behind the Wall. They said, someone asked, do you regret working so much? It's just such a fantastic question because it's an open-ended question and it relies on Don to move the, what do you call it, the pendulum or the dial to wherever he's going to move it. He's got an option to answer that in any way that he wants to. And how does he answer it? He says, so the question is, do you regret working so much? And he answers it saying something like, he takes his boys to work all the time. And he said, so I just thought, on the question, on the question of, do you regret working so much? He sort of answers it. He doesn't say, yes, I regret working so much, or I wish I didn't work that day, or whatever. He says something about, I take my boys to work all the time. Now, does that mean he took summer to work? Does that mean, I don't know, what does that mean? But it just seems a very odd.
He said that.
Okay.
Sorry, I was freezing.
I thought he said that, and then he spoke some more, and he kind of ended it with like, well, I do what I gotta do, which again is just so typical. What do you think about that? You know, he doesn't seem like he really wants to do anything, but he has such low impulse control that he, you know, if somebody calls him in the middle of the day, oh, quick, okay, I gotta do what I gotta do. You know, he's always sort of saying that, you know, well, I didn't want to do this, but I did what I had to. And I thought that was also interesting.
I just wrote down here.
I've written down.
Okay, I just want to say this quick, Stephanie.
Yep.
Where he was asked about the prison, like, I think Chris McDonough said, you know, should whoever took summer go to prison? And Don said, I don't know if I could do that. Those were his words. He said, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could do that. And then he said, it just depends on all the circumstances. Anyway, I thought that was really significant. He didn't say, you know, like, should the person go to prison? I don't know if I could do that. Okay, Stephanie?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I wrote down that, when he said, do you regret working so much? He actually said, no, I take my boys to work with me all the time. And then I think Chasing Truth repeated, well, did the boys go to work with you that day? And he said, no, I didn't take them very often.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. But it just seemed like that's another very murky area. Did he have the boys with him or not? Where were the boys? Where are the boys in the story as well?
So,
were they really at home playing computer games? Bria, Raymond asked you a question.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, oh, he did. Raymond, Bria, can children do drywall finishing work? No. I mean, they might be able to mix up some mud or something like that. I mean, you have to be on a ladder to do finishing work. It's top corners, and I mean, maybe some of the bottom stuff. I wouldn't say that they, I mean, I guess I don't know if I haven't seen a lot of children on work sites like that. You need a hard hat and steel-toed boots. I haven't seen it. I mean, maybe some other people have seen where some, you know, sometimes kids are on job sites. They may have been on their job sites from time to time. I don't know that. I wasn't there. Could they really do that work? I don't know if they would be able to do a lot of it's up on a ladder, and you've got a bucket of the mud and these little paper strips, and you're up there and you're, putting it up, finishing the drywall, maybe mixing some of the mud, but I don't think so. But I did want to just quickly say that when we're talking about where was Dawn that day, and you're talking about that in midday or in the afternoon, in Dawn's interview, he says when they talk about when Candace called him that day, and he says, well, I called her. Well, why were you calling her? Well, just to, check in on her, see where she was going. He says, well, she was just going to the lake or the store or whatever. So I just thought, well, I'll just stay and work a bit more, then I'll just stay and work late, because that's what I do. He said that. He said, And I'm thinking, well, you knew that Candace and Summer were gone all day and had been gone all day. So you knew that the 3 other boys were at home by themselves, and you just thought, I'll just stay and work late. I don't know. Why, you're just going to stay and work late when kids are at home alone and have been for hours. I thought that was strange. Just wanted to, that was in my notes, just about the phone call, because a lot of people were wondering if and when that phone call happened. I know that some people have said there was more than one phone call, obviously, that day between the two, that afternoon. When it happened, where were they? Yeah, he said that she just said she was going to the lake or whatnot. Right, yeah, I did bring that up. So yeah, where was Don? That's a really good question.
Another thing that came up in this very last interview was forgiveness. So I thought it was quite weird how the interviewer led him down the garden path, basically said, Don, something like, Don, I'm kind of guessing with your faith, forgiveness is a big deal, so it would just be normal for you to forgive someone in the situation. I just thought it was odd to do it like that. So I was kind of expecting Don just to go, yeah. Sharon Stevenson, thanks a lot. But what is quite interesting is that was brought up in relation to the question of what should happen to the person responsible, forgiveness and what should happen. Mm-hmm. And so he said, I'm not sure I want to put someone in prison. That's what he said. He said, death is better than prison. Those were his words. And now if you think about that, and I hate to be this on the chin, but I think it's required. If Summer is no longer with us, then isn't that what somebody thought? She's died, right? And I don't want to go to prison. So in a weird way, just how symbolic those words are, death is better than prison. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You follow what I'm getting at? So just in the context of if Summer had died, this is a question. Would Don have done everything he possibly could if he was in trouble for whatever? I don't know why my alarm wants to go off. Just a minute. To avoid prison. And I guess one could ask, is that what all of this is about? Don trying to avoid prison. Just think of those words, death is better than prison. I wonder what Chris Watts would say about that at this point.
Coming from someone who's had several stints in prison, right? He's been there and not, right? And he said that, right, in regards to that. So, yeah, he doesn't want to go back. That's clear.
Yeah. He also said, it might take me the rest of my life to forgive, and then he laughed. And I don't know whether that laugh at the end, just him saying, he doesn't want to put someone in prison, but it might take him the rest of his life to forgive. Who do you think he needs to forgive in this? I'm not going to answer that, but it's a kind of a rhetorical question. If he's saying it might take me the rest of my life to forgive, who do you think he might be thinking about with that in mind? I just want to touch on something which is taking things a little bit away. Then I want to hand over to Stephanie just to go through a couple more comments. The people who conducted this interview were sort of taking to task other creators. Did they explicitly tell Don that they were recording it? And they were, like, what I thought was quite weird was Don was like, they didn't tell me, but I assumed they were. Of course he assumed they were. He's trying to get his message out. He's contacting a YouTube channel creator. Are you telling me, like, what is the point of talking to someone for 100 minutes, right? And saying certain things is you do want to get your message out there. Isn't that the point? You're talking to a YouTube creator. If a YouTube creator contacts me, I'm going to be thinking you're going to want to put this on YouTube. Anyway, so he did end up clearing up the interview that he did with Chris McDonough on another channel, which is now what we're talking about. We're talking about the odd things he said in that interview. Now, I wonder if he's going to clear that up as well. I don't know, but something that I think is worth just talking about is I don't know how much I should say about this, but I was contacted by the girlfriend of someone who is kind of the equivalent of Nicole Kessinger. It wasn't Nicole Kessinger. Catherine, thanks a lot. It wasn't Nicole Kessinger, but it was the same situation. It was the girlfriend of someone who had killed 3 people. Contacted me, and I recorded the conversation. We ended up talking, I think, about 2 hours. At the time, the case was a very big deal, and it was being broadcast in Australia. It was making headlines. I wouldn't say world headlines, but it was certainly making headlines in different countries. And I thought, you know, if I had to put this out, my name would be part of those headlines, right? The thought crossed my mind. But I also thought, I never told her I'm recording the interview. And I wonder whether, the thought just occurred to me. I just thought, I wonder whether I'm not being baited. Because if I do that, then I could get into trouble for doing that. And I did actually contact a journalist that had been covering the case, and I said, because I wasn't actually sure, I said, what does the law say in a situation like this? Someone contacts you, they spill the beans on all these different things, you record the recording. I mean, it's not like, you know, it's what the person said, but do you have the right to, Heidi says, sorry, I'm typing too fast, big red flag, that he wouldn't want justice for his daughter. I think so too. But anyway, the bottom line was, this journalist said, you have to get permission, you have to tell someone before you talk to them that you're recording them, and you've also got to get their permission to then pass on that recording somewhere, right? Regardless of what's in the recording. There are certain, I think, exceptions where it's in the public interest, but there you've got to tread very carefully. But I'm just saying, I was in that situation where someone in a true crime case called me, I recorded it, and I ended up doing nothing with that recording. I still have it. I've done nothing with it. And I feel like it's not, I think it's immoral to do that. Speaking of which, I don't know, Bria, I know you know about Simone Biles, the gymnast. What do you think of this one channel doing behavior analysis on her, on what she was saying? I don't know if you know about that. So someone, I think...
I haven't seen the channel.
I think that's an exceedingly poor case. I think that's an exceedingly
I think that, you know, we don't know what people are going through. I think that, you know, gymnasts who are Olympic level athletes, they put their body through so much. They put their body and their, you know, your emotions, and not only your body, your mind, you go through so much. And I think that we can't really judge, you know, what people are going through. The gymnast who decided to not participate in the Olympics, she said due to some mental health issues, she just wasn't feeling good about that competition, and she decided to sit out. But the thing was, she was supposed to be competing 2 new skills
I just don't think,
on 2 different events, and people thought it was a big deal, and she got a lot of...
In a situation like that, they're adding to the pressure by saying, I don't believe you on this, and blah, blah, blah. And this is a gymnast, this is an American Olympian that you now want to treat like a criminal doing lie detectors. I just think it's totally, totally inappropriate. I get that it's a popular case. I get that everyone's talking about it, but I just think it's, let's do lie detector stuff on like where it's warranted, I feel. I just think it's very, very poor personally. Just how I see it.
Right, and I mean, she's already won several gold medals in the Olympics. She is literally, you know, the best athlete that we have in the world right now, but people want to, speak poorly and analyze every little thing about it. Yeah, I don't think that that's right at all. I hope that she, will compete again in the next one and do really great and take the time that she needs to heal and with whatever she's going through. I'm sure she made the right decision. Sure of it.
Okay, so to everyone there's still like 2,000 people in chat. I think we made a little bit of a mistake last time where Stephanie and I sort of started talking about a different subject and we didn't say, guys, we're drawing the line here. We are now moving kind of away from the Summer Wells case. So I'm going to do that now. We might take a couple of more questions, but for those of you who feel like, okay, Summer Wells, nothing else, you guys are welcome to head on out. I just do want to bring up something that I think is really interesting. It does have a broad bearing on the Summer Wells case, but it's also of value beyond that. And I'm going to introduce the topic by showing you this article. Do you recognize this person in it? You know who that is? If I say Wade van Niekerk, have you ever heard that name?
I think I recognize it from you, but I don't remember why.
So Wade van Niekerk is really an amazing story, and the story I'm trying to tell you, I'll kind of hit the punchline now. One person's fairy tale is another person's nightmare, right? And I think the Olympics is one way that you can understand that. I think the Summer Wells case, the key question to ask is, who is living the fairy tale and who inherited the nightmare? Where's the fairy tale? Where's the nightmare, right? And I think there were definitely some people in the Summer Wells case that wanted the fairy tale, the hillbilly heroine, the hillbilly life, the partying nonstop and all of that, without the responsibility. And there were other people that were less happy in that situation. They may not have known that they were all that unhappy, but even if you just take the dogs on that property, do you think the dogs are very well cared for? So someone is living a fairy tale, but someone else wasn't. And I think that's part of the key to going to the next level in this case. So if you take that little key, if you want to call it that, and you take it to the swimming hole and you say, one person's fairy tale is another person's nightmare. So who was having the fairy tale at the swimming hole? So who was sort of on cloud nine and just having a great time? And who wasn't? And then how are they connected? And the answer is they're connected often directly. And what I mean is when you go to the Olympic Games, you are going there in search of your fairy tale, right? Some people are going there to win a gold medal. If you fail to win that gold medal, I'm not saying it's a nightmare, but it's not a fairy tale. But then you not getting your fairy tale ends up being someone else's fairy tale because they get the gold medal. I'm not saying it's necessarily a nightmare, but not everyone can have usually the fairy tale is at the expense of somebody else, right? Now in Wade's case, Wade won the 200 meters and I think the 400 meters at the Rio Olympics. He is the world record holder, Olympic champion. And then he did something silly. He played a little game. It's called touch rugby. And when you try not to get touched, if you are touched, then you've got to hand the ball over. And it's just a little game. So he's playing this game. He's actually an Olympic athlete. And while he's played this game, he suffered I'm not sure if it was a double cruciate ligament tear or a single, but basically in a situation like that, no one has ever come back from that injury ever. It's like that's a career killer, right? And so it actually looked like he was going to make history, that he was actually going to come back from this injury. And he was training and he was building himself up, and coronavirus is in a way a blessing because it extended the Olympics by another year. And then he qualified for the Olympics really late, but he qualified. And then you actually saw him running quite well. And I'm the first person to say, watching Wade, I thought, this is never going to happen. you are doomed before you begin, right? It's something I wouldn't want to say because I feel for him and I want to support him, but the odds show that you're not going to succeed in this endeavor. And yet he surprised a lot of people. He qualified for the Olympics. He went to the Olympics. And I don't know if he qualified for the final. I think he got to the semi-final, and then that was where his journey ended. But what is quite interesting is how the public relations pushed him to perform here and perform there and keep the fairy tale going. You know, have him appear here and appear there when he really needed to be very careful. He shouldn't have traveled to America in the middle of a thing where he hurt his leg again. I don't know if you guys know about that. But so what he was, and this is the part that's quite interesting. If you say one person's fairy tale is someone else's nightmare, the same applies when you're trying to sell a fairy tale. In other words, it's that, but in one person. It's not two people, one at the expense of the other. It is, if you're trying to sell a fairy tale, you often create a nightmare for yourself, if that makes sense. You get what I'm saying? So with Wade, Wade's trying to get his fairy tale back, but he's also selling the PR fairy tale with his sponsors and everything. Meanwhile, what he should have done was keep it calm and take it step by step and train properly and not travel to these exhibition events, because he actually got injured at an exhibition event, right? And then that set him back again. And then ultimately, all of this was in aid of showing him to be this great champion, and he never even made it to the final, right? So the other thing that I think will kind of shock some people here is that guess who is I don't know if it's still like that, I could be wrong, but guess who's the PR manager for Wade? The guy who's in charge of Wade's PR. I'm not going to say his name because he might not like it, but it's the same guy who's in charge of Oscar Pistorius. And when Oscar Pistorius when whatever happened to him, this particular PR manager didn't think that, he thought, well, he should carry on with his, he even testified at the trial. He basically said, you know, he should be able to carry on with his career. And just basically, you know, this shouldn't change really anything. He should be able to go back to what had happened. And you, in a weird way, you have the same thing happening with Wade, in my opinion, that he has the serious injury, but we're gonna sell the fairy tale regardless. Do you get what I'm saying? And so, and that creates a nightmare. That scenario of, just think about it. You've hurt your knee, but you've now got to pretend that everything's great when you actually need to be careful. But because of this and that and all those other things. But the same thing, it does apply with the Summer Wells case, with trying to sell the fairy tale. And a lot of people said early on, I know on Patreon as well, said, what if it was actually a really nice life on Ben Hill Road? You know, what if those kids, they could play outdoors and it was all actually, they were actually having a really, really good time. And well, there are definitely some people who want you to believe that. There are people who want you to think that that's true. Do you think it was true? Because the other side of that is, if it was true, if it was this great life, this nothing's wrong with it, then why did Summer Wells disappear? Why is she still gone? Why is it 54 days and she's still gone? If it was a fairy tale. Because I can tell you now, the person who's gone through a nightmare is Summer herself. Whether Summer is with us right now or not, her being wherever she is for 54 days is a nightmare for that little girl. And as I'm trying to illustrate with this illustration, I think that it's because someone was trying to enjoy their little fairy tale in the middle of this. And that led to Summer's nightmare. That is, as I say, is taking you to the next level of how and why and who.
Mm-hmm. Even think about what you're saying in terms of the SA allegations against from the sisters and stuff, right? Someone's fairy tale is someone else's nightmare, indeed.
Oh,
I don't know what you guys think as mothers, as wives, but if you're spending money on that is supposed to be for food, for school clothes, for, like keeping your house, making your house a home, and instead of all that money, time, and attention is going into that drink, that cigarette, that whatever, how much neglect you're actually talking about. And a child may not realize it, but if you look at the inside of that home, especially when Chris McDonough went in there, you might say, shame, they're poor people, but what is actually their focus? Where are their resources of time, money, and attention actually going? And what makes it worse is because they're poor, they can't afford to be putting their time, attention, and money into the things they're putting it into. Maybe that's a harsh thing to say. Maybe you could say, well, you're not unemployed in Tennessee, you would also be desperate. Maybe. But, when you've got children, do you take that, do you take that route? So it's definitely like, as a mother, when you see the Candace's home, doesn't that speak to you of, it's far beyond normal? Like, you can't say it's just someone who doesn't really have high standards with being tidy. It's something that's very extreme. Something extreme's going on.
yeah. It seems.
But did you feel that immediately?
When I saw the home, it was disturbing. It was really disturbing. Yeah.
Or do you look at that and go, it's poverty, the poverty's
No, that's
the
not
reason.
poverty. My mom grew up in a very poor household. They lived very, humbly, and didn't have a lot, but their home was super small but neat and tidy. I mean, and then they were well cared for, the best that they could be. My mom didn't have all the fancy outfits, but she had a couple that I think she said she had like 3 or 4 outfits. Like, literally they had to keep washing them. And she was one of 5 children. But their house was not a mess.
Yeah.
I don't think that has to do with being poor. I think that has to do with priorities, perhaps some kind of mental, I don't know.
Vivian says, when you're drunk and high, really no motivation to clean. Sorry, Bria.
Oh, no, I saw that comment too. Yeah. I was saying, to me, it's extreme neglect.
Yes.
Is what I saw. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a fairy tale.
Someone says, stop interrupting.
Right.
It's a little bit difficult. Sometimes when you start speaking, then the echo comes out. So it's quite difficult to know that you have an opportunity. I'm sure if you're on this, you'll realize it. Someone said, I think she was sold, groomed for 5 years and sold. That's definitely going to be a theory that has legs. I don't personally subscribe to it. What do you think, Bria?
Pardon me?
Someone said, we're just trying to find it again, that she was groomed and sold.
Right. Yeah, no. I don't think so. No, I don't. I don't believe that. I don't think that, no. I just think that there's too many things going on that day that I think that it's much more logical and reasonable to imagine that maybe there was an accident and then a subsequent cover-up than, because I'll ask you this question. If you really believe that Summer was kidnapped or sold or, black marketed or whatnot, or taken and sold or anything like that, then why wouldn't they buy themselves a little more time, like maybe a couple days, a few more hours? I mean, why would you call panicking to 911 immediately? Oh, she's missing. Why would you bring that kind of attention immediately thereafter? Wouldn't you want, like, don't you think someone would be like, gee, you know, we haven't seen her around at church, it's been a while, I don't know, something's going on. I can't imagine.
And the
that makes no
key,
sense.
the person who you've now done this deal with would be like, thanks for the kick in the teeth. You gave me some and now you call the cops on me immediately. You know, they would be like, thanks a lot for that. I'm being a bit sarcastic, but it's because I don't think it's really even, I don't think it's I know some people like the idea in the sense because it's got shock value and it's, I guess, titillating, but I just don't think it matches the circumstances. And Summer herself would know she's abducted, and you know, it's quite anyway. Yeah, so I don't think that is. I just want to. I see we're approaching the 3-hour mark. I just want to thank you guys for being part of this. I know it's not always so easy. There's some nastiness that comes through every now and then. I think each of us is a recipient at a different time. Some people prefer to hear from other people, blah, blah, blah. But overall, I think this was a good exercise. And I just want to thank you guys for being here. I know it's 3 hours of your time as well. And I think we did pretty well, especially Bria, for doing this for the very first time. So,
way to go.
Yeah, it's also good. Bria, it's the first time we've ever sort of spoken kind of directly. So it's good to have this interaction. Stephanie's also given you a little bit of a hand there. But I think we are going to do it every now and then. We've had almost throughout this entire chat, 2,000 people in chat. So that's really not bad. Some pretty interesting questions. It's also quite nice having one of you looking at the chat while maybe some of the others are talking, which is harder if they're just two people. SM Kovalinski says Bria made wow. Must I bring her back? I don't know. Must I bring her back? I don't know if I must. I think I have to. Add to stream.
There she is.
Sorry, guys.
We wanted you to hear our graciousness for joining us.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so appreciative of everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
So
Thank you.
Quite a few people
asked, having us.
Pleasure. A few people in chat asked a couple of times, who is Bria? Who is Stephanie? Basically just, I guess, super fans, people really interested in true crime, patrons on Patreon that have been there for a long time, also moderators on this channel, just true crime enthusiasts, but also strongly affiliated with true crime rocket science. They are basically true crime rocket scientists, if that's not saying enough. I just want to read this comment from SM Kovalinski, who's another patron. He said, Bria made an important point regarding possible essay. The fairy tale of the father would be the child's nightmare. Perhaps a key in this case. That's well summarized there. So we're heading to 3 hours. I just want to finish off by thanking Sharon Tuck. She's a new moderator, did a really good job today. Thanks, Sharon. She says you can join True Crime Rocket Science on Patreon. The link's in the description. Just to let you guys know, I'm about to finish the Doubt audiobook, and we're about to go into Treachery, which is the first book I wrote on Casey Anthony. So that'll be the next audiobook on Patreon. It's a really good narrative to go into right now because we're dealing with so much that's the same. Substances, a long period of missing that's inexplicable and strange. The parents being involved or not being involved, what's going on there. Vehicles that have a strange role to play, the woods, and so on and so on. And so it's through the Casey Anthony case that we can intuit additional intertextualities that if you just know about the Casey Anthony case, you might not know that much. But when you go into the narrative quite deeply, you start to realize this and that and the next thing. I am actually reading Jeff Ashton's book right now. You can't really see the cover because it's like just a black book, but it's, I don't know if you can see that. It's Imperfect Justice by Jeff Ashton. Came on Amazon just the other day. But yeah, and in his book, he talks about the demeanor of Casey herself, that she just seemed very calm. And her brother and her parents were all, and also George was quite calm as well, as an ex-cop. Her mother was freaking out. And then also how even Cindy's story changed quite early on, where she, in the 911 call, she referred to the odor in the vehicle, and then suddenly when the police were there, didn't say anything about the odor. And you just start to get a weird sense of how reality shifts as reality is being absorbed by the people at the center of it. And you have a weird situation with this case where there are also quite a lot of people. There's the parents, there's the children, the brothers, the siblings, the grandma, and then there's also Macbeth and his mother, and then it goes on and on. Quite a big what do they call it when you have a movie with a lot of starring actors? It's got a name.
Like a cast of characters.
Yeah, but it's got a sort of a name when there's like the Magnificent Seven, and it's like a real big group of starring actors. It's got kind of a name. Anyway, it's that sort of thing. There are a lot of people that are involved in this, which makes it definitely more complicated, those dynamics, figuring out those dynamics. The other thing is almost everyone in their own way seems to be lying. There's some truth from that one, but also lies from that one. Some truth from that one, also lies. And so that's the real test for true crime rocket science. Can you see the woods for the trees? And we've already made our positions quite clear on certain things, and we'll see how that pans out. Are opiates going to be relevant? Are the dogs going to be a deal breaker for, all that kind of thing? So, Bria, it must be, is it 10 o'clock in France?
Same time as you, 11.
Oh, 11. Okay, so it's quite late there. So anyway, thanks a lot for your time. I know, Stephanie, you've got a bit more weekend remaining in Connecticut than we do.
Yeah.
Yes,
Enjoy
yes.
the rest of your time at the Riviera.
Monaco. I will. I just got here and we're actually going to just go to Monaco tomorrow. It's a short drive, just a half an hour drive from here. So we're going to make that happen. We're going to celebrate our anniversary in Monaco, and then we're going to spend the rest of the week here.
Just big congratulations again for your anniversary.
Yeah, happy anniversary.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Bria, do you know who the princess is of Monaco?
No, I don't.
Actually, a South African. It's a South African swimmer, Charlene, who married the Prince of Monaco. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's a really small country, and I've never been there, so it'll be my first time. So maybe I'll let you know. Maybe I can take some photographs too. And I was hoping that I would have this like amazing sunset and to be live. And I've just got to the French Riviera. I couldn't believe it, but all I could do is just get a quiet space. I just got here, so I didn't know where to go. Yeah, well, so
Bria, I don't know what to say. If I'd said to Stephanie, I'm insisting we must do a live while you're away on your anniversary. I don't know what Stephanie would have said, but
I know anyway. Actually, I would have had to say no. God bless your husband. My husband was like, "Can we just have focus on each other?"
No, absolutely. No, so Bria, we really appreciate it, but we're gonna let you go now so you can be romantic and have your fairy tale.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
But
Well,
we
I do
will,
thank you again. Thank you so much for letting me come on. And, you know, there's so much more to even be said about the dogs and how they intermingle as such. I feel like I didn't get to say as much as there is to say, but the point, right, you almost could. But I do thank you for letting me have the chance to come and just to talk to all of you wonderful people. You guys all care so much. We are all here every single time that we come here, every single time that TCRS comes and talks about this. It is to talk about summer. That's exactly why we're here. There are a lot of intertextualities and a lot of the little things that, you know, you talk about them, so it brings things into perspective. A little more, and I hope that we were able to do that for all of you tonight. I thank you so much for everyone being with us, and I just thank you guys both for being with me and talking with me. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk to all of the true crime rocket scientists out there, because yeah, we really love what you do.
thanks a lot. Thank you so much for being here, Bria. Thank you so much for choosing the right shade of background. You nailed it.
This is all yeah, well,
You got this, sorry, you got that right, yeah.
Great.
That's just a silly little joke. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for being here. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys next time. Stephanie, thanks a lot for your input. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Eh?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care.
Okay, cheers, Bria. Okay,
Thanks,
bye.
everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.